All righty. Good morning. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's having a good day thus far. I am happily done with a doctor's appointment that flew by quickly. Wasn't anticipating that. Was worried we are going to have to back up this interview a bit, but all worked out. So we're here today, and we are going to have a bit of a mixed bag here, learning about several different units and MOSs, which is going to be quite interesting. I've since talking to the Force Recon guys from Vietnam, the ANGLICO group is interested me, and our guest today was not only in First Recon, but he was also in the ANGLICO community. And I believe he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he stood up Fifth ANGLICO, I believe. Yep. So we're going to be covering a lot of very interesting stuff, a lot of timeline here, different wars, different places deployed. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And before I go on, our guest, of course, is Mr. William Spanky Gibson. No relation, same spelling and everything, but as far as I know, no relation. But we're going to go ahead and get into it. And early life and family history will be very, very interesting with our guest today. So, yeah, I think y'all are going to like this all around. But hope you're doing well today, Mr. Gibson. And
another day in paradise.
Yeah, roger that. We usually like to ask our guests a little bit about themselves, early life. So to get it started, when and where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Claremore, Oklahoma, which is 17 miles up the road. Grew up here in the same town I'm retired in. And, you know, there was a couple years at the beginning. My dad had just gotten out of the Navy from Vietnam, and he went on to work for the city of a small town called Chelsea, Oklahoma, where his family lived. And, you know, really quickly, 2 years, my parents got a house here in Pryor Creek, Oklahoma. It was actually my grandpa that was still active duty Marine Corps, getting ready to retire, 30 years of service. He bought them their first house for like 21 grand. It was a new build, 1973. And we came here. But I was two, don't remember none of that. I remember the house, but yeah, it was quite
Pretty cool.
My parents, because those were tough times back then in the early 70s.
Oh yeah, and that's interesting because we've got quite a few viewers that they're Oklahoma boys, and they'll enjoy hearing that you're a fellow Oklahomian. You mentioned your father Navy vet. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your family history of military service, because it's quite unique?
Sure. I'd love that. Yeah. So my dad, start with that one. He joined the Navy in 1958. His dad, who was a World War II vet, died in 1957 at the Fayetteville VA. He was only in his late 30s. My dad was, basically 16, 17 years old. My dad had 3 younger sisters, so he went in the Navy and became a Seabee and got stationed Adak. Alaska was his first duty station back when I was still owned. And then, so his dad was World War II in the Army. My mom's dad joined the Marine Corps in 1942 in California, where they lived back in those days. And he served from 42 to 46. After the Second War was over, he got out. Korea pops off in 50. He goes back in. And then he stayed till 75, 76, did 30 years of service. And, for me, being a little kid, I remember very vaguely, the pictures bring back some of those memories when I was 4 or 5 years old, where we took the train from Oklahoma in the early 70s, mid 70s, and went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina to see my grandpa right before he retired. And I've got this picture. Yeah, I've got a couple different pictures of me when I was like 1, a little bit before 1, and then I've got some when I was 4 or 5. And then when my grandpa retired, the only grandpa I had, really. When my grandpa retired, he moved back here to Oklahoma for a period of time in 76 and lived in Tulsa suburbs. And so it was nice, obviously he was by far the biggest influence for me. The memories as a kid, back for me as a little kid playing Army or doing those things little kids do in those days. The Marine Corps part of it was just, that was something I knew back then I would eventually do. But yeah, he stayed here till like it was 1982, and then moved to Yuma, Arizona, and that's when he passed away in 2000. That's where he lived, was Yuma, right outside, just right down the road from the Marine Corps station.
Was he island hopping? Well, where was he at in the Pacific?
Yeah, when he basically did all the Pacific campaign, and fortunately, wish I could send you way more photos, but he's got a really cool photo, and I never got the chance to ask him where was his photo taken. But it's a battleship on the horizon, and somewhere in the islands. Well, then in 1990, to kind of jump around a little bit, I'm doing a Liberty float in 1990 to go to the Portland Rose Festival parade, and I've got a very similar picture of the USS New Jersey before she was decommissioned, right around Desert Storm, on the horizon, taken from the ship I was on, which was a little, most of the ships I was on are all decommissioned. So it's kind of wild. And when I was a recruiter later on in life, I had those pictures stacked in a frame. It was always pretty neat. But yeah, he hit the islands. Even after joining the Marine Corps, he was a quiet professional, never really said much what he did, what islands he hit. Wow. I tried to research a lot of that off his discharge papers when he passed away, and I did help my mom set up for that in Yuma. But those are those typical regrets. I think we have a lot of family lineage in theaters that we never, same with my dad. My dad's been gone for 9 years, and I regret not asking more questions now, but I think that's typical.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you with my dad. It's the same thing. I know bits and pieces and enough to know where and what he was doing, and but not much more. I really, there are a lot of questions. God, if he was only around now while I was doing this, it'd be a lot of fun to have him around involved still. And I know he'd love to. Yeah. I know he'd love to speak to you guys and see all the modern era Marines and such. That's that's a really unique family history, and it's not too hard to see why not only you ended up in the military, but also the Marine Corps or the Navy, the Department of the Navy, aka Marine Corps. So before we jump into the military, still as a young man, shall we say, you kind of already know you want to join the military early on. Did you play sports? Were you a big sports guy? I'm sure Oklahoma, you're outdoors hunting a lot as well. And
yeah, I grew up hunting. When we moved out of the house my grandpa bought us, I was in right before second grade, and we moved out to Locust Grove, where we have some kids that live out. Same road called Iron Post Road. Ironically, my wife's daughter Shelby, her husband Donnie, Mia, Sutton. You met Sutton the other day when we were running this, the little one. They live on that same road 3 miles short of where I lived until my mom talked my dad into moving back into town. She hated it. I loved living in there. I'm an only child. I don't, my parents didn't have any kids after me. And so being an only child living in the country, you tend to grab your 22 and go around and shoot the things your dad tells you can shoot. And, now obviously I wasn't old enough to deer hunt or any of those, but I was tethered to my dad when he did it. So I learned young how to clean an animal, squirrels, rabbits, all the small stuff you can hunt when you're, 8, 9, 10 years old. I did all that. And my dad was quite the old traditionalist. I had to start out with a 32 caliber, which is over here in this corner off camera, a 32 caliber squirrel gun muzzleloader. So my dad was a big muzzleloader guy, loved rendezvous. He was 150 years past his time. If it was up to him, he'd be a mountain man on a mountain somewhere back in those days. Mom, no. My mom didn't like game meat, didn't like hunting, would never shoot a gun. So, but they complemented each other well. So as a kid, I walked around the woods. And back in the late 70s, right around 80, 81, especially late 70s, everything was Bigfoot in Oklahoma. So it was, that was the other thing, because I'd watched Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man, battle Bigfoot on the 3 channels we got back in those days. So the woods had that lure of danger, but it had that peace and serenity of what it is. And I loved it. I love being in the country. And, which, who knew that would lead me to enjoying the jobs I got to do. But yeah, I was always in the woods, catching snakes, and not that I'm, some big animal wrangler. I'm not, but I really did enjoy just walking in the country. So peaceful.
Oh yeah. I mean, I knew immediately. Where I grew up here, born here, or was born in town, moved out here. My dad got this land, and thought, man, college came around. I was going to go to the University of Alabama. Trouble occurred, couldn't do that. Had to stay closer to home. So I went up to Troy, and great time there. But I got to Troy, which is a bigger city than where I'm from, but not big by any means. And I immediately realized, boy, do I love the country. And that's exactly what I did. I rode 4-wheelers, fished, jumped in creeks, just did it all. And there's nothing like country living. I really think there's a resurgence of that. People are starting to realize, maybe those people that lived out in the country all alone had something right to begin with.
Yeah, get away from that whole 15-minute city.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's I love hearing that. So did you going through school, did you plan on going to college first, or did you plan right out going military?
No, and to answer your sports, which I didn't get to on my tangent, I dabbled in sports up until junior high, which here back then was traditional 7th, 8th, and 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. And I gravitated in 5th grade to wrestling. Nice. So I played baseball, I played football, but I was a pretty small guy. So wrestling became natural. One, in football, weighing in junior high 70-some pounds, getting hit by guys that are 140 pounds or 150 pounds, I didn't like it. My thing, and I wasn't that good at it, to be honest with you. Wrestling, I was pretty decent at. I wasn't great, but wrestling was fun. And I stuck with that, until my sophomore year at a duel, blew out my ACL, had my ACL reconstructed, and that kind of ended. But on college never interested me. And I don't think, compared to like my own sons being in high school when they were, counselors are all about college in the past couple of decades.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, they compartmentalize people. You're going to go trade. You're going to do this. You're going to go to college. You standouts are going to definitely get a few scholarships. Very few athletic scholarships from here. Some small schools, baseball, football. Like we barely even had soccer. Back in the late 80s here in Northeast Oklahoma.
We just got it here.
But for me, I was like, college wasn't even a thought process. It was, I'm graduating high school, I'm going to the military. And, back in late grade school, junior high, my dad had me in the Navy Sea Cadet program, which him living vicariously through me, putting on some, Old Navy uniforms. Then I got in the National Guard Explorer program because we had a National Guard camp right here in town, 125 years. Well, you're putting camis on, man. Who doesn't want to do that as a kid? And it was definitely going military. And I almost went Army. My best friend who we joined, I joined the Marine Corps. We were going to go to boot camp on the buddy program. A year before that, he and I had been in German class, and 2 of our senior buddies in German class went Army, and they both went linguist. And that interested me. And I almost broke away. And the end of my junior year, I went to MEPS to join the Army to be a linguist. I wanted to be a linguist. Naive at that point, didn't realize all the testing, D labs, and all that stuff to get to it. But they disqualified me because of the ACL reconstruction in mid 10th grade. So I didn't have full mobility yet. And that was a blessing in disguise. So, but I almost did. I've been to a lot of Army schools, after the fact.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into that. As a matter of fact, several interesting things that come from that.
But there was a short glimpse where my buddy John Ketcher, the Cherokee Marshal now, he got pissed at me because he heard I went to MEPS to join the Army. And what do you do? Because, you could go to boot camp before your senior year, have that delay your senior year. You're almost like a reservist, and then go to your school once you get on to after graduation. And I'm like, well, I can go to boot camp a year early than in the Marine Corps, and I can be a linguist. I can go to Europe. I can go wherever they're going to send me. And, it sold me there for a little bit. But God had a way of saying no even back then, even though I didn't recognize it.
That is very, yeah, he's got a way of putting you where you need to be, man. That is, I always love hearing those stories like that, or either, the Army recruiter wasn't there that day and the Marine recruiter was, or vice versa. We've heard from the SOG guys that wanted to be Marines when they saw their first Marine in dress blues, like, I'm being a Marine.
Oh, yeah.
And going to sign up. And of course, the Marine guy wasn't in the office, and the Army said, come on over. And I think about that, and it's like, how different would that have been had these guys ended up in the Corps? And there you are now, the same. How different would have been you in the Army? But
that's the kicker. Even though all the way back to a young child, I wanted to emulate my grandpa, all the way back. Sergeant Stryker, Sans Iwo Jima, all the old movies I got to watch with my dad. Always, I remember when I watched Fighting Seabees with my dad, which is all about Second War, which made him reminisce. And I'm a kid. This is probably late 70s, early 80s. I don't remember. But then going, now I don't want to be a CB. I want to be Sergeant Stryker. I want to be on Iwo Jima. I want to do that. And then to have something like German class, and Frau Dubin was my teacher back then. And then two friends of mine that I'd known, since junior high that go in the Army. I'm like, okay, well, I might renavigate this assumption. And then to have it taken away, it's like
clear indicator. You're meant to go the Marine path here. What year was this taking place when you graduate high school and enlist in the Marine Corps?
No, 1989.
89.
So I assumed, because of that previous June of 1988, when I got DQ or temporarily disqualified at MEPS, I just assumed back then that I was done. I'm not going to get in the military. I don't want to go to college. What am I going to do? I took junior and senior year precision machining at Votech, and I thought, well, I like working on a lathe and a milling machine. I'll just be a trades guy. It interests me. I enjoy it. My dad was my dad made everything out of all the things you can think of. So I'm like, I'll be a trades guy. And flash forward, first week of May of 1989, the recruiter's name was Johnny Matthews. He had put my son John in, or not my son, I stand corrected, my buddy John Ketcher in when he turned 18 back in September. And John still beat me up our senior year. And because we hung out, we wrestled together, all these things from junior high. John's beating me up. I'm sitting in in-house detention the first week of May because I got in some trouble with my home ec teacher. And I'm in-house. Here walks in Johnny Matthews, Staff Sergeant Matthews. And he goes, well, heard you tried to join the Army. And they said, no. John tells me you want to be a Marine. I'm like, well, of course I still want to be a Marine, but obviously I can't. He goes, let's send you down. So I think it was May 4th or May 5th of 1989. I go down to MEPS. He gets me out of in-house detention, gets principal to sign off on it. Next day I go down to MEPS and I get qualified. and I'm not 03XX, I'm open contract. And I've got a ship date of June 7th, just a month away. And that would link me with John Ketcher. That's when he's going. And John's dad is still active duty Marine Corps, and he's a series gunnery sergeant at MCRD San Diego. And, John is like, I get signed up. John's happy again. Not that he was ever mad. We're friends. We're still best friends today. And we're like, we're going buddy program. We're going to boot camp together. I'm open contract. He's wanting to be 03XX because dude looked just like Chesty Puller when we were in high school. And we always joked, you're the next Chesty Puller. And, hey, we're going to go. Well, we graduate like 22nd or 23rd of May. John flies out to San Diego. He's just going to wait to go to boot camp from his dad's. He takes off. Johnny Matthews, our recruiter, calls me up and says, need you to ship. When? May 29th. Well, I'm supposed to go with John on June 7th. No, I need you to go. So May 29th, 1989, just a few weeks after I enlisted, my dad's birthday, May 29th, I take off for boot camp and get there May 30th. Obviously, you get to receiving barracks. And I have no way, there's no cell phones. It's all snail mail and landlines. I have no way of getting a hold of John. I don't know his dad's phone number. I know none of that. So here I'm in boot camp. I got no way of telling him. Didn't think to tell his mom or his brother and say, get a hold of John on shipping week early. So I enlist first week of May. I'm in boot camp the last week of May. So yeah,
Holy cow. Wow, man. That's quick. And then, man, that is a bit of a bummer though. There, John, I'm sure was a bit let down not seeing you show up there for boot with him. But I mean, got to get in while the getting's good, and you have the chance, so get after it. I mean, so you being Oklahoma, you're sent to MRCD San Diego, and what's that like for you as a young man getting off that bus and the DIs start laying into you?
Well, it was the second time I'd ever flown. And I'd only flown one other time before that. I'd never been to California, even though my mom's family was all from Redondo Beach, Hawthorne, California. I'd never been out there. It was, it's how I got the nickname Spanky. I was happy as all get out. It did not, there's always a little bit of apprehension, fear of the unknown, those kind of things, but I was always kind of go with the flow. You tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. You tell me to do this, I'll do that. Go there, so I was just happy. And I was always Kool-Aid smiling around, which recruits are not supposed to do. And my drill instructors, they constantly, what are you doing? And, I got thrashed a lot, kind of like being in enhanced detention when I got recruited. I was kind of a, joker, but I was just ecstatic. I mean, this is beginning. Even though I don't know where it's going to go, this is my beginning. And I liked it. And I took orders well. I was pliable. I was meant for it. I really do think I was meant for it.
Oh yeah, your military family. I doubt and clear you didn't, but it's easy to see you wouldn't have had too much of a problem taking orders, hearing stories, and knowing what it takes for the military to run, men taking orders, following directions, and you being the new guy, you got to take directions. So what's next for a new recruit? You get in, shaved head, the new clothes, the recruit clothes, and all of that, and then off to a barracks and platoon for basic training.
So basically the way the Marine Corps did it then, and I'm assuming it's still somewhat similar, you go to receiving barracks. So in receiving barracks, you're packing up your clothes, getting your uniforms, getting your hair cut, taking tests, like, because I did pretty decent ASFAB, and you don't know time. Sun up, sun down. They're waking you up at sun, the sun's still down, and they're putting you to bed, but you're in receiving barracks, so you're not with your platoon yet, and they're basically giving you an overview on marching. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Not talking with your hands, not touching your face, doing all the things that the receiving barracks drill instructors do. But then you got a test. Well, remember, I was open contract. I don't care what job I get. I'm hoping infantry, but I don't know what I'm going to get. Well, they grab a group of us and ferry us to testing. Retake the ASFAB, take the D-Lab, the EDPT, the electronic data processing test. So there's a small number of us that are sitting in these booths with the old school computers, and we're doing these different tests. Don't even know what time it is. I'm assuming it was midnight. I don't know. I was tired, and now I'm going, what in the Lord am I listening to? Which flashes back to when I said I wanted to be a linguist. So now I'm finally taking the test that linguists would have to take. And I did okay on it, but honestly, at this point, I'm just praying that I get infantry. And because you don't know. You don't know until you're going to graduate boot camp. That last week, you find out where you're going, what school you're going to. But I'll pass this. So receiving barracks is just a few days. I'm assuming 2 to 3 days from what I can remember. And you're just constantly getting ordered around, chow, you got a couple minutes to eat. You're done. Get up, get out, fall in formation. And you're marching to the next whatever requirement is. And until you get to Sunday, that week, I'm assuming it was around Friday. We get in with our drill instructors. We get to our platoon. Mine was Mike Company, platoon 3044, 3rd Battalion. And Sunday, you're going to church. Whether you believe or not, you're going to church. You're either going Catholic or you're going Protestant. Catholics would go first, Protestants would go second. Well, for us, you're just so happy that you're getting out of underneath the drill instructors for however long it's going to be. They march you off, they release you, you go in. Drill instructors are in the back, but they leave you alone for an hour or so, whatever it was. Well, who do I see? I get to that next weekend, John Ketcher. He's in his first Sunday with his platoon. I'm only a couple weeks in, and we run into each other at the chapel. And he comes over to me, and because you have a little bit of luxury at that church for that short period of time. Dude, what happened? That's how we found out. I was in boot camp a week earlier, was at the chapel at MCRD San Diego. And then it begins. You start out baby stepping drills, how to take orders, and June 12th, 1989 was the day I'll never forget. It was my 18th birthday. I'm second week in boot camp is the day we got our shots. And back then it was like you would see in the photos. You line up and you're like cattle. Bang, 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 bang. You just walk by, they shoot you with guns. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, my 18th birthday in boot camp is me getting a whole crap load of shots, and then that proverbial gamma globin shot where you got to lift your leg and take it in the butt cheek. And back then they still did the polio vaccine and all that.
I've got pictures of my dad and his San Diego boot camp book, and they've got the old guns, and they look like they were painful as hell with all those going in there.
Yeah.
Man. So when all this takes place, and are you with the same DI, or when boot starts, is that a new DI that is officially in charge of y'all for the next month or few months or whatnot?
Yeah, you get new DIs because receiving barracks has its own drill instructors. And then when you get to your physical platoon, because you got to think, the Marine Corps every week starts a new boot camp process. So then you get your team of, They march you over. You get put in what we call the classroom in the squad bay. And that's how you meet your drill instructors. They introduce them, which is quite impressive. It can be alarming for many people because it's kicking foot lockers, roaring, coming after you. And then your senior drill instructor comes out last, and he's kind of like the father figure, or better case, probably more like the mother, less disciplinary and more, more teaching and not as dramatic until he has to be. The junior drill instructors, they're the ones that are more like a figure, I guess you say. They're gonna take you to the pit. They're gonna thrash you. They're gonna scream at you nonstop all day long. They're gonna tell you how stupid you are, how dumb. What do you think you're doing? You went the wrong way. You faced opposite of everybody else in the platoon, which to me was always funny. I just thought, well, this is what I'm meant to be. This is hilarious.
I always love seeing pictures or guys reminisce or what have you of during boot camp and all of that, and the knife hands in the face. It's
back then there was no knife hand.
No knife hand.
They'd poke you right in the chest. Now, they didn't beat us. You never got punched, slapped, or nothing like that. But you would get the finger poke in the chest, or you'd get the brim of the drill instructor campaign cover, whack you right in the face. You definitely get the ninja launch. They get mad at you drilling, they would launch that campaign cover, and they would say, if that thing hits the ground, you're all going to the pit. Which country went to the pit every day anyway. They maybe march you by, somebody would do something stupid, everybody in the pit. And it's teaching you discipline. That's all it is.
Man, that is wild. Love hearing that. Love hearing those stories. As boot
suck at that time.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what most guys say. Looking back on it, you think it's the worst thing in the world until you get out of it and you realize it prepped me for a lot of things that were coming down the line for me. So what are you, your open contract, you're looking to be an infantry Marine. How's that working out in training? I know you've got to qualify with the rifle, pistol, and all of that, but what's next in the step here as a new recruit?
Well, you make it through, you go first phase, which is at MCRD San Diego. Then second phase back then, you went up to Camp Pendleton, Tetson Range. And that's where they taught patrolling, bivouac, how to put up your tents. Because back then it was the two-person pup tents. One guy carried the canvas, shelter half is what it was called. So you got 3 poles and a half a shelter half. Your buddy's got the other side. So, and you call them pup tents. You learn basic patrolling. You go, you spend a whole week of what they call primary military instruction, or PMI, where you're just aiming at a barrel. You're learning fundamentals of shooting, side alignment, side picture, how to squeeze, which is always tough when you are a hunter, because all the bad habits, my dad taught me Kentucky windage as a kid. I didn't have a scoped rifle. It was always open sight. So that was easy with the M16A2, but it's, I've never learned slow, steady squeeze, or, tap, rack, bang for clearing a, malfunction in your weapon system. So you're learning all these attributes. And then after it's, at the end of that time, you qualify. And then once you qualify, you head back down to the last, about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, whatever it was. And you have what's called third phase. Now, when you're third phase, first phase, you're not blousing your boots. You're not doing any of that. They didn't have name tags back then. You don't have the USMC ironed onto your breast pocket, and or the Eagle anchor on your cover. So third phase, you get there, you get to blouse your boots. Now, you don't have the USMC stuff on yet. And now you're doing a lot more classroom development, more detailed early Marine understanding, the history and all those things, they blend into recruit training. And then back then, there was no crucible. There was not the stuff they have today that happens at the end of boot camp, where you do it at Camp Pendleton. So you're doing all the classroom, you're doing final drill competitions, final PFTs, final low course. You're doing all those things that they, fine tuning to make sure you're doing swim quals and all these things to get you ready to transition onto your school. And then the last week is, for us was final drill, that final PFT. You get to iron on, you get your blues picture. You get your uniforms, given to you. You pay for them. You don't realize that, but you're getting your standard issue for going on into the Marine Corps, and so, yeah, it was, and I was the second squad leader. I'd been the squad leader at Pendleton. I was going to graduate. I got meritorious PFC out of boot camp as squad leader. And here I'm this little bitty guy. I'd lost a little bit of weight that I chunked up with my senior year, but I'm still fairly small. And, our guide, Craig Dowley, I'll never forget him. He was probably 5'8". I'm in the low fives. I got Leonard, never forget this guy from Flint, Michigan. And he's one, I think he was third squad. First squad was, I think, a guy named from Arizona, Wabanascom. He was like 6'4". And in the pictures, from graduation, I'm up there right up front as second squad leader. And I'm tiny. I'm dwarfed by the first and third squad leaders. But, and it wasn't that I was some Billy Badass or I wasn't strong. I think the drill instructors just saw that I could take direction, I could give direction, and set an example for my squad and my fellow recruits. And then you graduate. And when you graduate, like my grandpa was there, a buddy of his from Korea that was still a master guns was there getting ready to retire. My family. And you're just excited because you're going to graduate and you're going to go on. Well, that week, probably about Friday, Saturday timeframe, that is in the classroom. And that's when you find out where your school is. And I had gotten lucky. I got 03XX and I'm going to be the infantry guy. Well, that Sunday, I remember talking to John Ketcher at church. We would link up, in our phases. He had just come back from Pendleton and we're both getting ready because, he's just a week behind me. And we're talking. He had got aviation my final Sunday. That's right. We'd already had, I said, dude, I'm 03XX. I got aviation support. So I'm like, wow, that's weird. I'm thinking we're going to be in the grunts together. But, so that's boot camp in a nutshell back then. It was, it's a lot different now from what my son told me. So it was, completely different dynamics. But, and then you get your 10 days of boot leave. And so you get to come home and then you move on to your school. So,
I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, it had to be vastly different because, y'all had a little bit of stuff going on in the 80s, but it was semi like Heartbreak Ridge or whatnot. It was peacetime military for the most part. Panama. Yeah,
Panama. The drill. I remember the drill instructors. That was the summer I was in boot camp. Everybody was talking about Panama, and they're like, "You guys better pay attention because you're going to go infantry, and every one of you are going to war." And they really pushed that. And knowing that, just in a year and some change, we would be going to Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm. Man, so when you get your 03 designation, where's schooling going to be taking place for you next? Where are you off to now?
Yeah, it's Camp Pendleton. And one weird thing that they told us in boot camp was they were talking about redesigning. Boot camp's 13 weeks. And they were talking about adding into boot camp. They had a test program going on called Marine Combat Training. And they were going to add it to boot camp, but they hadn't done it yet. And they never did. Mm. So I had to go, when I got off my boot leave, I had to check into Camp Pendleton, and that's where School of Infantry West is. And then, you know, if you're in Lejeune, you got School of Infantry East. But I had to go to MCT, Marine Combat Training, for 4 weeks. And they had the Quonset huts we were living in back then. All that stuff's all destroyed now. And they were, if you're like it is now, if you're infantry, you don't go to that. If you're not infantry, you go to MCT, Marine Combat Training. Everybody went to MCT. I was the 4th class of MCT. So it was a brand new program. And honestly, it was a waste of time for all of us that were 03. Because it was back then, it was 4 weeks long. It was a lot of field time, a lot of more advanced weapon systems, you know, getting into the crew serves, getting into more offensive and defensive operations. But it's right there at, you know, San Onofre at Camp Pendleton, where School of Infantry West is. So I check in to MCT, and I know I'm going to be there for 4 weeks before I'll just go across the parade deck, basically, and check into the School of Infantry to get my direct MOS. And that's what's going to link into the, you know, conversation here. That's when I NDOC'd. The weekend between MCT and checking into School of Infantry Bravo Company for me, some of my buddies that had been at boot camp, not in the same platoon, but in the same series, we're all in the Quonset hut together, and they were like, "Hey, Spanky, we're gonna go do this NDOC." And well, I knew a little bit about Recon from a friend here of my dad's that was a retired Marine First Sergeant named Gene Beck, retired out of Recon. And so I knew what it was, but I didn't necessarily know that's what I wanted. I didn't know what it took to get it. I knew his stories, but because his stories, I'm like, hell yeah, I'll go. I'll NDOC. And I made it by the skin of my teeth, you know, because it's advanced swimming. It's, you know, it's much more advanced than what I'd ever understood. And you don't know if you pass it or not. We get there Saturday morning. I don't remember the number of group of us that were there. And basically you're with them until Sunday afternoon before you check in at 6 p.m. or 1800 to your School of Infantry handlers. So I NDOC over that 2 days with my buddies and a bunch of other guys that showed up and check into School of Infantry, get Bravo Company. And it's basically like receiving barracks the first couple of days. You know your company, but you don't know your individual MOS. And when I'm checking in with those buddies I just NDOC'd with, I'm kind of following along with them. Because to me, even though a couple of them are the same age, like Don Maraska, he's a colonel now. Don Maraska was like 25, 26 years old, had been in college. He enlists. He was in my series at boot camp. But we all looked up to him because he was older. He was smart, great athlete. So we're just kind of following him. And there's another guy, Jason Gerhardt, who I really befriended in those early days. So we're just kind of going together. And, you know, I'm following them. Well, they were 03. Well, Maraska was 0331, which is machine gunner. And Gerhardt's 0341, a mortarman. Well, when I get my book at the first desk, it says 0352. I have no clue what that is. And I ask the Lance Corporal, I'm a PFC, and I said, what is this? He said, it's Tactical Operated Wire Guided Missile System. I'm like, what is that? Well, you drive around on a Humvee with a big missile on top of it. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to shoot machine guns like my buddy over there. And he goes, well, your ASFAB score is pretty decent, but your open contract, you're going to go. Well, then he looks. Well, I'd been a pizza delivery driver in high school. I had like 11 driving violations, you know, reckless driving, careless driving, speeding tickets. I was always, you know, pushing the boundary when I came to delivering pizzas. And so I said, well, you can't get your Humvee license at NSOI because you have too many driving violations. So go to this line. Well, I didn't go to that line. I went and got behind my buddy to get in the machine gun line. Well, I keep meandering up there And I finally get to the den. Remember, I'm a little guy. Get up to it, and I'm like, get my thing. He goes, you're not supposed to be in this line, PFC. I'm like, well, I want to follow those guys, and I want to shoot big machine guns. He is, yep, sorry, go get in that line. I'm like, I don't want to get in the line. I want to stay in this line. PFC, get in that line. Aye, get in that line. 0351 anti-tank assaultman, the Dragon and small. So I stay in my line, and another guy that in-docked with me was in that line. I'm like, well, okay, here we are. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm just where the Marine Corps wants me. And that's how I became an 0351. And then, you do the training in School of Infantry, lugging that stuff, that was cool, but it was a lot of threat ID, setting 25 yards away from a little playing card size tank silhouette with your binos and going threat, foe, mainly all Russian APCs, tanks, and then you'd have remember the Israeli MACV tank. Well, that's friendly. Don't shoot it with your Dragon. And then the last 2 weeks of SOI, we get our orders. That's when you find out where you're going to duty station. And I got 1st Recon Battalion, along with those other 5 guys that I knew from boot camp that, we had in-docked, asked me to in-dock with them. All 6 of us got orders 1st Recon Battalion, and right out of SOI. So I never went to the infantry.
Wow. And where was 1st Recon stationed or headquartered at?
Right there, Camp Pendleton at Camp Los Flores. In the late 80s, they had been at Camp Talega, like Heartbreak Ridge you mentioned. When they filmed Heartbreak Ridge back in the early 80s, it was 2nd Recon Battalion, but it was filmed at 1st Recon Battalion at Camp Talega. But they had moved and had all new facilities at Camp Los Flores, which you had 1st LAI is what it was called back there, Light Armored Infantry, the LAVs. And then you had 1st Tank Battalion back then was there. And you had 511 Artillery was there. And then you had some support elements at Camp Los Flores. But that's where the Paraloft was, the dive locker. They had everything at Flores, which is right next to Edson Range. It's just right across this little, valley, if you want to call it that. And then you had DZ Tank Park, which is right there. So you could get up, parachute right in, walk all your crap over. And you're right there a mile, not even a mile from Red Beach. So it's just inside the I-5 that skirts the coastline coming across Pendleton. You got a beachfront view. You got a drop zone there. You got the mountains right behind you, which later on I'd learned those aren't mountains. They're just elevated. And so what Oklahoma kid don't love 1st Duty Station being a really cool unit with a great view, with a short run to the beach. And, I was in heaven.
Yeah, man, it don't get any better for that for a young man wanting to be recon. That's pretty sweet setup right there. With you getting, again, guided and being put where you need to be and ending up with 1st Recon. What are you guys doing at that point in time? I know Desert Storm's coming up, or what are y'all doing when you first check in or get with Recon?
You check in, which I checked into Charlie Company with the other 5 guys. Yeah, you thought receiving barracks was interesting. You're what's called a roper. Until you get Recon qualified, there's this thing you learn really quick. You get a sling rope. You wear that sling rope everywhere. And every Recon qualified Marine tells you do 25 and 5. That's push-ups. 25 push-ups, and the last 5 is, airborne scuba Recon Ranger in your company. So you do lots of push-ups, and you run everywhere you go as a roper. Now, this is Halloween week. So it's the end of October of 1989. I check into Charlie Company with my buddies right around. and you're basically a roper. So you run everywhere you go, you get thrashed. You're constantly getting screwed with until you go to school. And I didn't go to school till the end of January of 1990.
Oh.
So it ain't like it is today. You don't pipeline up before you even get to your unit. Okay, it's completely different now between Raiders and force companies and recon battalions. It was completely different back in those days. But my first team leader is a guy named Lou Gregory, Sergeant Lou Gregory. And we had another team leader, Brian Yarlam, my ATL, and my roommate, because back then they were in 3-man rooms. And these were fairly brand new barracks. They were not much over a year old. And they put me in a room with a corporal that's going to be transitioning pretty quick, named Tim Sowers. I'll never forget this guy, Corporal Sowers. Holy hell, man, this guy was an animal. Lou Gregory was little, but he was a bulldog. And Brian Yarlam, Sergeant Yarlam, that guy was everybody was an animal. And here I am, just this little kid, barely in puberty, 18 years old. I'm just doing what I'm told to do. I was lucky I even made it there, I'll be honest with you, because I was not a 300 PFTer. I did well on the swim call just because I grew up swimming in a creek and lake. But I was never a trained swimmer. I didn't know, lucky in boot camp, they just said, do this. And I emulated it. And I was able to do it. But I didn't know, because that's a big part as a roper. You're in the pool constantly. You're run, swim, running. You're running the hills. They're constantly pushing you. And I'm lucky. I'm just lucky those guys asked me to go, and I got it as a first duty station, because I'll be blatantly honest, I was the low standard amongst my peers. And thank God those guys mentored me. All of them, the corporals, the sergeants, the teammates, because, I really had to earn it.
Wow, that's awesome though, that these grizzled veterans and older guys. You're a man, you're in the military, but you're a kid essentially, and them, getting you ready, get you up to speed, and getting you on your way to be a recon Marine. That's awesome. I love hearing when the old guys really step up and take the younger dudes under their wings like that. That's the only way guys learn that things get passed on is somebody taking you under the wing like that.
Yeah, mentorship is massive. And it's also a good way to figure out, is this person going to be able to do the job? And before we invest a lot of money into them. And a lot of those sergeants, and me just being happy to be there, just ecstatic that my first unit is the last unit that first Sergeant Gene Beck I talked about before. That's his picture right there in Vietnam. He did 9 tours in Vietnam in combined national programs. And, he's passed a couple of years ago, but that man, his stories ended up being something really cool for me. But that mentor-mentee relationship is massive to figure out, do they have what it takes as a newbie? And because they might not have the physical, they might have the mental, they might not have the physical, but we can build the physical.
Mm-hmm.
We can make that happen. And, a lot of those NCOs, back then we had Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie Company, had been in the movie Heartbreak Ridge at Talega.
Wow.
In the movie, the guys that had been in it actually had their wings and things and patches on their UDT shorts. The guys in that movie that didn't have anything on their UDT shorts were the ones that were actors.
Oh.
So it was kind of cool. I learned a lot early on, in 89 and then 90. This is pretty neat. These guys have been around since 82, 83 as young Marines.
I'm going to have to go back now and watch Heartbreak Ridge just for that insider piece of information and see the dudes with their quals on there. I thought, to be fair, I did notice some and point that out and thinking like, dang, some of these guys are already either dual cool or what have you. So that's awesome. I love it. And to hear you're right there where all of that took place is really, really cool as a young man. I mean, that's gosh, I mean, you really can't get better a better duty station or MOS job than that right off the bat. I mean, that is
like I said, very lucky. Very lucky I had my fellow Marines that really led me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like I
Literally.
said, I was good at taking orders and I was good at following. And then there's that side of me that got the nickname Spanky, that if you didn't keep me on a leash, you know, I'm not going to do anything super stupid, but
I'm going off somewhere.
Because if I go off on my own, we don't know where this is. You know, this ain't going to be good, most likely. But to answer, you know, to finish up with your point before Desert Storm, you know, end of January, go to Coronado. Thank God, get rid of the rope, not doing 25-5s all the time. You know, get to Coronado. We're there for a few months to go through amphibious reconnaissance course, what it was called back then. Now it's called basic reconnaissance course. Now it's in Pendleton at the same place School of Infantry is. It falls under School of Infantry. Back then, it fell under Landing Force Training Command Pacific. So get to Coronado. That's cool. You know, you're watching buds. You're seeing SEALs. You're doing all the advanced training, which is basic training for reconnaissance Marines, and but more advanced for an infantryman. And you get on with it. Graduate amphibious reconnaissance course, made that by the skin of my teeth. Staff Sergeant Steinhauer was my group leader for that school. And he sat down and told me, he goes, Recon Marines are hurting. He goes, he said it. He goes, you know, I'm going to pass you because you make all this. But, you know, like I said, I wasn't a physical specimen. I would do it, but you know, the run, swim, runs, the long fins, 3-mile fins, you know, a lot of that stuff. I could do the applicable stuff, but it was at that bottom par standard for Recon. And so I got lucky. Staff Sergeant Steiner set me down and said, I'm going to pass you. You're going back. Well, when I get back to 1st Recon Battalion, they moved me to Bravo Company. So I didn't go to Charlie. I went to Bravo. And, you know, Charlie Company, all but one of my buddies that went to another company, they all, you know, start ramping up this summer. I did that Rose Festival parade in June, get back. We're doing training, beach weeks. You know, you're doing all these different training packages for your company and your platoon. Well, then in late August, you know, that's when Desert Storm, you know, it's going to kick up. And my buddies in Charlie Company, they're the first unit to support the infantry and tanks and all that. They alert, I think it was the end of August, first week of September, and they're flying to, you know, the Middle East.
And was that just because? And I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
You're good.
Why was it only Charlie? Did they not want the entire contingency on this, or was this just size enough for Charlie to do, and they were waiting for y'all to get further orders?
Well, the way the battalion works, okay, indifferent to Force Company. You know, Force Company has a completely different mission, especially direct action back in those days. They were still fairly new. First Force had only been alive for a couple of years at this point. They're a meth asset, but Recon Battalion's a division asset. So your company supports an infantry regiment. So back then, you didn't have a permanent regiment like you do now with 7th Marines at 29 Palms, California. You had 1st, 5th, and 7th Marine Regiment was West Coast. So Alpha Company, Bravo Company, and Charlie Company then support 1st, 5th, and 7th. So we were habitual relationship Bravo Company, 5th Marine Regiment. 7th Marine Regiment was Charlie Company. And then your 3 platoons kind of, you know, you kind of have an amphib platoon, you kind of have a DRP, if you want to call it that, deep recon platoon, and then you kind of have a everything platoon. but no longer a direct action platoon. You're still keeping with the reconnaissance, gathering information, or the beach landing asset in your amphib platoon. And so 7th Marines is going to be the first West Coast group of guys to go. So Charlie Company is their habitual relationship. And then each of those companies, Marine Corps fights 2 forward, 1 back, and they rotate that away. So you have 2 battalions forward, 1 battalion back, and then you rotate depending on the mission. Desert Storm is a little different, but still a linear, contiguous battlefield, meaning online, in segment, phase line approach to battle, not distributive operations, or not, the way OIF and OIF was, and we'll get to that later. So since 7th Marines is going to be the first one going, because they're the desert rats, and they're going to have tanks, they're going to have LAVs, they're going to go. Charlie Company is their support. So they were that initial wave for the Marine Corps to get pre-staged in country, to do that job. So, and since we're Bravo Company with 5th Marines, they weren't going to be the first ones. So we're sticking with our school slots. I went to jump, we're going into a normal training pipeline in August, September. And then I'm taking off to, some of my buddies are in dive school. I got slotted and went to jump school in October of 1990. And so I'm at Benning at Airborne School. And then we get back, I'm going to go, the group of us that hadn't went would get slotted to go to Navy dive, either at Ford Island back then or back down to Coronado. Well, then that's November is when we alert and start be prepared to. We go on what's called Alert Contingency Battalion. And because now we're going to be prepared for 5th Marines. So we got to accept that, which is what we did. We went on what's called, I guess it would have been December. I guess it was, December. We took off on 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade on ships, 13 ships heading. Ironically, because you're seeing the news right now, I was on the LPH-10 landing platform helicopter 10 USS Tripoli. Now you do some research on that. Now we have the new LHA-10 Tripoli. Back then it was LPH-10 Tripoli. Is one of the 2 ships that hit a mine in the Persian Gulf in 91. Dang. While we were on ground doing the invasion. So that brings back memories now with seeing a new Tripoli. I had to look it up. I was like, wait, that was an LPH. Well, they've decommed all the LPHs. So I thought that was ironic that the Tripoli is going to be in the Persian Gulf. The last time I remember the Tripoli being in the Gulf before it was decommissioned, it hits a mine.
Jeez.
With all the mine or moves, straight.
Jeez. Man, so and you guys are completing classes or schools, I should say, and everything. And do y'all finish schools and then start to get info if y'all are going to be going over, or is it still going to take a while, or what have you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way it was back then, at this point, I'm a Lance Corporal, so I'm not in the planning process. I'm a primary radio operator carrying a KY, 104 with a KY-65. And you're just either training in the field, learning comms, like CW, I went to CW class, or, excuse me, you're just learning your role in the team. And, for the team leader and assistant team leader, which at this point, my team leader is a guy named John Benish. He'd already been to jump and ranger and all this stuff. And then Corporal Cliff Moffitt was my assistant team leader, which we'll talk more about him a little bit later. Ironic with my own son. And so you just piece away. The operations would just send you wherever you're going. So you'd have some stuff would be as a group, as a team or a platoon. And then when it came to schools, you might have a mobile training team come in. That was one of the things we got to do. They brought in an SF mobile training team, and a lot of us got to do an SF demo course over a few weeks. Wow. Their Camp Horno demo range. So, it was interesting. You're constantly doing something. It's not like it is today where you have a pipeline approach. And then after a couple of years, you go operational. Back then, it was just you're OJT.
Hit this and hit this and
yeah. So you might get sent to a school, you might come back. It's all in the order of how operations going to slot you. And for most of us younger guys, they're just, team leader comes, gets you, said, go to ops or go to the staff sergeant, which staff sergeant that I had, Gertis, was the same guy that had done my NDOC.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool. And different to Staff Sergeant Rubakava, who was my staff sergeant at Charlie Company before I went to school. So that was always kind of neat. But yeah, you're just kind of going with the flow, but you're training a lot. I mean, it was fast. For Desert Storm, you're constantly doing something. And then the weekend maybe is your downtime.
Did you hit either Ranger or Pathfinder school before Desert, or was that after?
No, that was way later. So
way later. Okay.
Yeah, that was after I got to ANGLICO.
Okay then. Okay, yeah. I'll put that in the ANGLICO section then to bring that back up then.
Yeah, because I went to a number of MTTs and a number of schools at Recon because it was easier for Battalion before Battalion disbanded in summer of '92 to bring instructors. And over a week or 2 or 3 weeks, you get trained on Hearstmaster. You didn't go to Humvee school back then. You just did a Humvee class with the motor pool and got your Humvee license, but it wasn't like later on where you had to have your physical license. They were like, okay, all these people can drive the Humvee. I went to Coxswain School in '92 at Coronado and Over the Horizon Insert and all that stuff. Wow. I already had 3 years in Recon, almost. And it was like, well, now you're going on 15th MU, and this is before we went to Somalia. The MU requirement is you've got to have so many licensed coxswain drivers. Well, all we did in Recon was beach weeks and patrolling and radios and spy rigging or rappelling or parachuting or all this stuff. It's like, why is the MU requiring us to, have so many people with a card? And, after Desert Storm, a lot of stuff changed. Mm-hmm. But even still, the MTTs were the way to go, and certain people might bleed off to schools. But if you're gone for 2 or 3 months, your team's at falter. You're short for that period of time. And I think that's why they went to a pipeline approach like everybody else did. Because everybody else, Navy Special Warfare, Air Force, all the special operations organizations back then, because we weren't, they had pipeline approaches. And the Marine Corps, I think, just kind of fell in line with that.
Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned Somalia as well. Do y'all get on the? I'd forgotten. Do y'all get on the ground for Desert Storm, or is the next thing for y'all Somalia? When
yeah, we got on ground. We cleared Awafra. We started out in support of 5th Marines, which they were an Amtrak. All on Amtraks back then.
Oh, fifth was all Amtrak then.
Yeah, that they were mech heavy.
Wow.
And we're doing, something we didn't cover. If you think of Force Recon back then, and you think of Battalion Recon, and then you think of stay platoons, scout sniper platoons within the infantry. You go out a mile or two for stay, you go to 2 to 50 for the Recon Battalion or whatever the mission is, and then deep asset would be that force company, in support of the MU or MEB or ARG or whatever. So that's the way it was back then. So when we got on the ground in, late January, early February, we got there when they were doing the air campaign. So Desert Storm, Desert Shield, that once they went from Shield to Storm and they started that 30-day air campaign, they were staging all of us. Well, our 5th Marines was Awafra area. So you got Kafchi that everybody knows about that's on the coastline. You come in a little bit and you got a Awafra oil field. And that's what we went through. And then we went up to Ali Salim, the air base, and then started punching. Well, by the time we're sitting on the ground during the air campaign, by this time they said charge, within 4 days it's over. we're in Aliyah Salem, and then starting to move north to the northern border of Kuwait, and there's like war's over, and start your retrograde procedures, and so then to stay on track with this, they use a lot of guys from our platoon and our company to help with the oil field platform. So there's only me and a couple other guys who weren't dive qualified. So we're setting in, we went to Bahrain, then went to UAE. We're kind of having some fun in Bahrain at the ASU, and, got to go to Dubai, and they're using our guys to maybe plan for capping all the oil fields, Saddam Below, and all the gas and oil platforms, the Go Plats, and using all of our divers. Well, me and a couple other guys, we're just getting to screw off basically while our guys are working and enjoying a little bit of liberty. Well, then everybody comes back and they said, well, you're getting back on ship. Well, the Tripoli had hit the mine. So they're trying to figure out, we had 2 ships hit a mine. They were in Bahrain. They had towed them into Bahrain. We got to see them. And we're going to put you on a new boat. Well, they put us on an LST, the USS Peoria. And we went to the Philippines. Well, what happens? The volcano blew up.
Oh, wow.
So we, and I mixed this up. Bangladesh, on our way to the Philippines, I missed this. It's a pretty big one. It was Operation Sea Angel. They had a typhoon come through and kill a couple 100,000 people.
Jesus.
In I think it was March, April of 91. So they used part of our Marine Expeditionary Brigade to help retrieve bodies and, go in and, which I have some pretty interesting photos of taking a 46 and flying in to help at the airfield because it had all been under 8-9 foot of water and do a humanitarian. So we got to do the humanitarian aid there. And then Philippines was probably first part of June, right around in June. And then we got back to Pendleton right around the 1st of July, 2nd of July of 91. And then obviously went on leave. I came home.
Wow. Yeah, some of these photos of the
until December of 92.
Man,
when we went
those okay. Yeah, those Bangladesh photos and the flood, that's some intense photos of the relief mission.
Well, and there was a lot of bodies floating in the Bay of Bengal. I mean, it was a
bad scene
as a young man.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, already the places you've been and named, but combat, being in Desert Storm, and then being on humanitarian missions where you're literally seeing the worst of what can happen when nature turns against us, and seeing that, I mean, that had to be tough as a young man to see all of that. And it's populated as Bangladesh is. I mean, yeah, it had to be.
Yeah, it was pretty
god awful. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that, like with everything else in life, for me, it comes with the territory. You enjoy doing your job, but you also understand one of those missions of the Marine Corps is helping people. A lot of people don't realize that. They don't think of the non-combatant evacuation operations, humanitarian reliefs. So there's other roles that the Marine Corps has that most people not around the military or the Marine Corps never understand. They just think it's war. We do so many other missions, like in Heartbreak Ridge. If you think about it, they explore that with the Grenada aspect, getting the students out. But
there's a great article written by the Association of Diplomatic Studies and Training, and it's called Op Sea Angel: How the Gulf War Saved Bangladesh. And it basically is saying, had it not been for you guys in the Navy flotilla, y'all literally saved Bangladesh. They put it in glowing terms that had the Navy not been where they were when they were, more would have been dead, and Bangladesh might not have survived. So that's a hell of a compliment for y'all.
Especially on a very small footprint country with a high population that has one export, tea, that I knew.
Wow.
So, and then to have such a massive population die.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, looking back now, God works in mysterious ways, and just so happened we're on our way to the Philippines and we're there.
Man. Yeah, absolutely. Again, putting you where you needed to be. That's a common theme running here. You guys, you mentioned you guys get back, and did you say that Somalia, was it March of '93 when you guys end up getting over to Somalia, or
December of '92?
Oh, December of '92.
Yeah. So basically, after Desert Storm, come back off leave, you start going back into the training pipeline, doing different stuff. When my oldest daughter was born, we were JTF-6 to encounter narcotics in New Mexico on the border. You're kind of in that end of the Bush era, Bush 41. We're getting used a lot. Summer of '92, LA riots. Normal workup, going to classes, courses, and schools. Well, then we started lining up for 15th MU. So our platoon, we're going to support the MU asset and be the battalion, the battalion level reconnaissance asset with a platoon. And we start the MU workup. Well, in the MU workup, we're down at the FBI training facility in Arizona, and we're staying at a place called Williams Air Force Base, which was in the process of closing down, but it's right next to the Flea Tech. And we're going to do our RNS mission, recon and surveillance mission, on those cadets that are down there. And there's a guy named Bob Hassel, me, and a guy named Michael Mattingly that were great friends. And we get the opportunity to get a little liberty, and we go out and get rowdy, a little bit too much libation, and we do some damage on this Air Force base. It's in the process of closing down. Well, it doesn't look good. Next morning, we show up to the Surveillance and Reconnaissance Center. Pretty hungover, if you want to call it that. Still drunk, technically. And that's when Captain Hitt was our platoon commander. That's when the Air Force comes over and says it can only be Marines from this unit because there ain't nobody on this base, really. And yeah, within a few hours, Staff Sergeant Gertis is walking us over to the flight line to get on a Hue and fly back to Pendleton. This ain't good. Got in trouble, got kicked off the MU. Got reduced in rank, 45, lost pay for a few weeks, and 45 extra physical duty, 45 restriction. And yeah, here I am on my 21st birthday, summer of '92, on restriction with a pregnant wife.
Oh,
they're not good. And what happens at the same time? Recon Battalion disbands.
Oh.
So we're going to what's called Recon Company, 5th Marines, Bravo Company. And Charlie's getting split up. And then Alpha Company's kind of getting split up. Same time, 5th Force Reconnaissance Company is standing up in Okinawa, Japan at Camp Hansen. A lot of guys get orders over there. I get orders over there. Well, because I'd been in trouble, because my wife was pregnant, the captain cancels my orders. And but come December of '92, 15th MU has been on float. They're actually the first group of guys that hit the beach under all the cameras, if you look that up. And the SEALs are hitting the beach in Mogadishu. Those were all my buddies. That was all the guys from the MU. It wasn't SEALs. It was a bunch of Marines. A But nobody thinks Marines, even back then, they don't think Marines do that stuff. Hydrographic surveys, beach landing, reconnaissance, all that stuff. And I'm sure SEALs were in our mix. I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm like seeing some buddies on there being called SEALs, and I'm laughing. Well, within a few weeks, they alert us up and they said, "You're flying. You guys are flying over." And we got to, we ended up supporting 7th Marine Regiment. And we fly to Egypt, don't even get off the planes. We fly to Shannon, Ireland, fly to Egypt, wait for the go-ahead to fly into Mogadishu that night. And then because they were still in the process, it's been about 2 weeks, I think. And they were still trying to make sure the aircraft, the airfield in Mogadishu is secure. So they fly us in. And then the next day, Bush flies in. Clinton's already been elected, but they hadn't transitioned yet. And, we're waiting for orders to see what how better to support 7th Marine Regiment in Somalia, southern Somalia.
Wow.
So well before Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down wasn't until October of 93. So,
man, what was the, I mean, it's always and still is crazy, scary. What was the atmosphere at that time for Somalia?
Well, it was wild. I mean, the first night we were there, the day before President Bush came in, they just, we have a thing called a Ranger roll. It's our poncho and our poncho liner rolled up, and it's on our butt pack. We're just all crashed out in this, right there on the flight line, across from the hangar that everybody knows about. It was basically just a blown out 2-story building where the air traffic control tower was, which was only a couple stories. So it's a no-walled, just cover. We're all just racked out. The very first night we're there, the Pakistanis doing border guard at the front gate, they hot shotted their weapons. So the sentry comes to relieve the sentry going off and goes to clear the weapon and shoots the guy relieving him. So here we are laid up in our Ranger rolls, with the smells, like any third world country, burning trash, burning crap, burning food. The smells are just, insane. And you hear a single round go off and then a lot of noise, and you're like, well, are we being attacked or what happened? And then they give us, on a walkie-talkie, tell your team leaders to stand down. It was just a negligent discharge at the gate. So that was the very first night. And they don't even know where they're putting us yet. And so that second day, Bush comes in. The third day, they move us to the stadium. And 7th Marine Regiment is headquartered in the Olympic Training Facility, on that eastern side of the city. And then we didn't stay there long. Our platoon went out. I got to work in Baidoa, Bardera, Galahari, doing that standard reconnaissance mission for 7th Marines.
Wow. And could at this point in time, what was the and like the movie, you see the food shortage going on and everything. Was at this point in time while you guys were there, was that developing? Was it already bad? Or was the food issue already at a fever pitch, so to speak?
Yeah, one of the missions we did, especially like in Galahari, way out on the Kenyan border, was guarding UN, escorting UN
peacekeepers and
food convoys.
Wow.
And that was probably the biggest reason they brought a lot of us in, because the way, everybody knows Adid, but they didn't realize that between Kismayu in the south where the port was and Mogadishu, and then really that whole southern point of Somalia, when the UN head chairman would send those food convoys out with the UN security, white vehicles, blue helmets, all that stuff, they would just get overran by all these different factions, because then they would take that food and then they would use that food against the local populace. And they would basically force the young men, young kids that were males to fight for them to maintain control, and then do whatever they want to do with the women. and anybody that wouldn't, fight with their faction, they would cut their hands off or rape the women. I mean, it was pretty ugly. I've got lots of photos of, kids waving when we're escorting the thing, and they don't have right hands because that's how they voted. So they would cut a little kid's hand off so they could never vote again, maintain their power. And, especially in the outskirt areas that I worked in, they're living in grass huts with tarps over the top, and they're cooking over fires. You get in the towns, especially Mogadishu, you could tell who was part of the bad guy system because they would have electricity. You get into the areas that they don't have, it'd be a single light with a battery, a car battery, and at night they would turn it on just for long enough to get a little bit of light before bed, if you want to call it that, cook, prepare, work with your family. And then they might have a rigged up alternator on a bicycle to plug the battery in and sit there and pedal during the day to charge the battery. It was pretty innovative. But I mean, it was for somebody like me. I mean, I was like, even at that point, three plus years in the Marine Corps, over 3.5, I was like, wow, people live like this. I thought the Philippines and those places I've been in were bad. Somalia was really bad. I mean, and that, not knowing a lot about it before it went down, didn't realize they had been in a civil war. But you look at the Olympic training facility, the stadium where we're at, and it's depicted a lot in the movie with the Pakistanis and the UN head. I mean, they were going to have an Olympics there in the 70s when it was an Italian colony. I mean, there's parts of that place was absolutely stunningly beautiful. You could tell it was beautiful at one time, but it just ran into the ground because of power control and politics. So
years and years of civil war. I mean,
control. God. It's all about control, power. It's sad.
That is just terrible. I can imagine the living conditions. I mean, that is just so sad that normal people trying to live their life are under the boot and under the control and guise of people, trying to get more and more power and make more and more money. Very sad to hear. So how long are you guys on the ground in Somalia before you end up heading back stateside or continuing the cruise? Or
about 3 months. We started turning over to the Army 10th Mountain Division in late March. In March of 93. And I was due to get out in May of 93. So I'm getting close to end of my 4 years. I wasn't going to re-enlist because, before all that, I'd gotten in that trouble, got reduced in rank, all that stuff. So, it was like, we know we're going to be leaving before first part of April and, get back to Pendleton. And, so we did our right around 3 months there, turned it over to the Army traditional. That's the way, non-war, the Marine Corps worked. You make the footprint and get in, get out, get the Army, and the Army's a sustaining force. They got the numbers, they've got the logistical support. We work in MAGTAF, Marine Air Ground Task Force. We're more to set a footprint. Now we can do all the missions. We've proven it over our lifetime. But the Marine Corps was never really designed to be a sustaining force. We one hitter quitter, get in, get out, let the Army do the longevity, and then call us back if need be. And unlike OIF, OEF, totally changed the dynamics on that.
As we'll be getting into here directly. You mentioned you're going to be getting out in May, and what is that process like? Is you get out of the military after serving for 4 years, I believe, so far?
Yeah. So basically, we get back from Somalia, and there's a number of us short timers, and at that point, I had been a point man, and Dan Spees was the primary RTO, and they don't know what to do with us. We get back, and they put us in Camp Horno in a 2-story old barracks that they're going to destroy pretty soon. And we start the transition process. You have about 30 days of what they call TAP and TAMP, Transition Assistance Process, Transition Assistance Management Program. And we're short timers. So we check out a supply, turn our stuff in, check in occasionally during our out processing procedures. We're just prepared to get out. We're not doing training we're really no longer part of our platoon and company. And so we're not even at San Mateo where Recon Company 5th Marines is. We're at Camp Horno. Nobody's really messing with us, and we're just transitioning. And I'll speed this part up because I know it's going to come. I get out, work odd jobs during summer. I'm married. I've got a very young daughter that was born in October of 92 when I was on that counter narcotics op. Well, I've decided at this point, because of the training I'd received on top of everything else I learned in Recon Battalion, I'm going to go into the medical field. I've gotten very lucky. Didn't even talk about it. Our corpsmen, when we short on corpsmen, you designate guys in the team that are aid and litter, kind of like your EMT, if you want to call it that. You get to do a lot of training. I really gravitated to that medical training and within my team. So I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to college at this point. I get out. I work odd jobs all summer, and because got to make a living. Thank God it was a lot cheaper back in those days. I start school in August of 93. I do a pre-med program. And then I eventually stopped doing the odd jobs with the temp service because I'm working like welding and industrial work just to make some money. And because, I'm not getting in the VA. I'm not doing any of that stuff at 21, 22 years old, the way I look at it. And I got a job in the ER, working as an ER tech. Applicable experience for medical school when I get there. Well, my wife gets a job as a nurse's aide. My wife at the time gets a job at the same hospital as an aide, and I start school. And I go after school like I went after the Marine Corps. I'm taking 20 hours a semester. I'm working nights, working a long shift on the weekends, studying. I'm not a super smart guy, so I'm studying a lot with a little one, a toddler. That makes life a lot funner. And I'm doing this, and then I finally get into April of 95, March or April. This guy named Jamie Nunez was the recruiter in Claremore, where I'd originally recruited. And the college I was going to was in Claremore. I'd stop in the recruiting office, talk to him. And he'd ask, you ever want to go back in? I can't go back in. Kind of like my initial get in. He goes, oh, don't say that. And it worked on me for a few months and weighed on me. Well, what happens in 94? The Marine Corps goes back into Somalia. For Clinton wanted us to draw it out. 94, 95 to get out. Well, I got buddies of mine that are back in Somalia. And, I flash back to October 93, even when they're dragging Shugart and Gordon through the streets. I'm like, 94, 95, my buddies are back in theater. A couple came by and saw me when I got back. I'm like, this sucks. I want to go back in the Marine Corps. Why did I get out of the Marine Corps? Well, I go back in. April 18th, 1995. Jamie Nunez sends me down to MEPS. Now, this will come into play here in a second. I think we talked about it before. April 18th, I'm in a MEPS. Well, at this point, mid-90s, they made a ACL reconstruction permanently disqualifying for the military.
Oh.
I go in to see the doctor, and he DQs me. He disqualifies me. You had an ACL reconstruction 1986, 85, 86. I'm like, but hey, I did this time in the Marine Corps. And I'm sitting out there just waiting for the Marines to come get me, and front desk at MEPS at the Mural Building, downtown Oklahoma City. Finally, I'm like, no, I got to get back in. I just stormed in. The lady tried to stop me at the desk. I just went right in that medical officer's office. And he's in there, dude in his underwear, checking them out. You need to get out of here. I'm like, no, You sign me off or I'm not leaving. And he did. He overturned his disqualifying factor.
Holy cow.
Yeah. What happens the next day? Oklahoma City bombing. Next day.
Jeez.
My package is on one of the Marines, the Marine sergeant that dies, and my package gets destroyed. Now, because of the office hours that I'd had in 92, in order to get a waiver to get back in, not even my knee, but to get back in because of the office hours and reduction in rank I had to have letters written. One of them, yeah, that way, Beck wrote one of my letters for me to get back in the Marine Corps. And it delayed the process. June of 95, I got back in. And, to jump forward on that really quickly, that's the story I told you when we talked last time. That's how I became a forward observer in 0861, because they were going to make me a motor T mechanic. And I had to comment with that Major Geving, was RS recruiting station commanding officer. I said, that's fine. Make me a motor T guy. That's all you're going to give me. When I get to get to Camp Del Mar, I know First Forces right there. And I was naive. Didn't realize First Force and First ANGLICO had moved to the other part of Las Flores, Camp Pendleton, not at Camp Del Mar. And that motor T school was no longer in Pendleton, but in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So I got lucky after a couple hours of him working his magic. He at least the fastest promoting MOS in the Marine Corps and the lowest MOS in the Marine Corps was Forward Observer 0861. They were hurting. Well, I had my gold wings. He's telling me about ANGLICO. I knew a little bit about it, but never worked with those guys. They were foreign asset, MU assets that, I knew they were sharing the Paraloft at Del Mar and our next First Force when we beat out the boat base. I didn't know that much about them. I knew they were a MEF asset. Well, I became an 0861, and that's what brought me eventually to ANGLICO.
Wow. And when you first get that your MOS as a forward observer, are you going anywhere first, or are you immediately trying to get to First ANGLICO, or where are you going from there, I should say?
Well, I had to go to Fort Sill for FO school, and then Coronado for Naval Gunfire School. Wow. And then while I'm in Naval Gunfire School, they give me orders to 3rd Battalion, 12th Marines in Okinawa, Japan. Me and a buddy of mine, JT Linhart. They send us to 312 at the fire support, basically your FSCC, your Fire Support Coordination Center, to the Naval Gunfire Platoon or section. And the Master Sergeant there sent me to 31st MU with a shore fire control party to Camp Hansen from Camp Butler, and to go on 31st MU, the MU that's going in the Strait of Hormuz. And I do basically a year in Okinawa. And then me and JT Linhart, when I get back off the MU, get back down to Butler, we get orders to First ANGLICO. And so we check in there. I think it was late September of 96. Well, I got lucky. I went to, my platoon, and Colonel Robinson, in his video, I remember you guys were kind of going over the SALT and the FIC, the way that's made up. Well, I'm a corporal, and obviously I'm going to a firepower control team. Now, ANGLICO was a lot like when I got to Recon. They have a thing called ANGLICO Basic Course that's their in-house, and prior to going to ABC, you're similar to a roper, like what I was talking about when I got to Recon before I went to ARC. Well, back then, a lot of times in my uniform, I didn't wear my jump wings in my camis. Well, I check in. I'm going to assault in the FIC. And, once I get down to the SALT, they make the determinations in NCO. I'm going to go into the FIC. And in the firepower control team, you got a lieutenant that's an artillery officer, and you typically have a sergeant that is your forward observer. And then you have some corporals and lance corporals. And it's a mixture of communicators and FOs. Well, but I get there. Gunny Nelson was my platoon commander, or platoon sergeant, excuse me. And they're kind of looking at me like, wait a minute. They're looking through my records and they're, well, we're not going to kind of boot you out because you ain't been to, treat you like a boot before you go to ABC. You've kind of been around. So, I had Desert Storm, I had Somalia. Well, most guys in 96 had not been in that. Your NCOs and mainly your staff NCOs had. And like my SALT leader, Staff Sergeant Alicio Lozano, LZ, he had been in Kofchi with 1st ANGLICO in 1991. Wow. And he's the staff sergeant of my SALT. And Captain Richard McCormick was the SALT OIC, currently a congressman from Georgia. And, I get there. We've got some officers transition. We got some NCOs transition. Well, they immediately moved me in with, Sloan St. John, these guys that have been around ANGLICO for a long time, between 2nd and 1st. Well, I kind of shadow the other NCOs. Well, hell, we do a JRTC and, Fort Polk, Louisiana, and the guys are like, he knows how to patrol, he knows how to communicate. Fire support was easy. I'd learned that a little bit of that in Recon. But the big thing in ANGLICO is shoot, move, communicate. But you got to be really good at advanced communications, and really good at naval gunfire, call for fire, and close air support. And since I knew CIF missions, close in fire support, and CAS missions, close air support, getting into the CAD aspect, the simultaneous portion of it came very quickly and easily for me. Communications was nothing. That was simple. I'd carried a radio so much in Recon, so I didn't need to be trained. They didn't make me go to ABC. And hell, I went to Jumpmaster School as a corporal in 1996 with my rigger, Delaney, and Lozano, Staff Sergeant Lozano. And so, they just started sending me to schools pretty quickly, which led to going to Ranger School in the summer of 98.
And that's a pretty rare thing. I guess maybe now not so rare, but talking to the Vietnam guys, I've only, out of the groups that I've spoken to, I think maybe 3 of them went through it, and 1 was force, and the other 2 were battalion recon from Vietnam. And that's the only time I've spoken to Marines that went through it. What was your experience with Ranger School?
Well, I was a sergeant at that point. I'd already been through Jumpmaster, DZSTL, all that training for the, for my SALT and FIC. And I'd already done a deployment. Oh, yeah. I did another 31st MEU to do Full Eagle. And we were on a Korean ship, did a landing with the Korean Rock Marines and the Rock Marine Recon. I love the ANGLICO mission. The ANGLICO mission, like Colonel Robinson told you, it's a really, really cool mission. But to get onto Ranger School, we were getting, and like you said, your recon assets normally get them. Your radio recon assets get some. Your ANGLICO assets would get them. And then occasionally Marine infantry units would get them. And they'd have a competition. But for 1st ANGLICO in 97, 98, we had flagged for closure to disband us like they did with Recon Battalion back in 92. 98 for 2nd ANGLICO, 99 for 1st ANGLICO. So when that happened, Major McCormick at this point, John Dillard, the operations chief, they just started pimping the meth for schools. And if you were an NCO or a young lieutenant captain, every Ranger class we had a quota. And sometimes the guys wouldn't take it. And, we had a captain and a sergeant, Sergeant Young, from my platoon that were in the class before me. And then like Lieutenant McMillan, my FIC officer, OIC, was the class behind me. We were getting Ranger slots. And because I was on the skids, let's put it that way, in my relationship, I was like, well, I'll go. I need a diet. And because I was at that point, I was more of a chubby Marine. Kind of like I am now. And I was like, we ain't doing nothing. We've already done our deployment. Now we're going to be going away as a command. I'll go, 2 or 3 months away. So May of 98. I'm in Ranger School at 27 years old, Marine Sergeant with all this experience. So the instructional aspect of it was pretty easy. Ranger School is nothing like being in a Ranger battalion. Rangers I'd work with, it's kind of like going to School of Infantry, except much more aggressive, no sleep, and no food. And because you don't get any sleep and you don't have to stop and eat very often, they're constantly making you move. You're constantly doing actions on the objective. Your training is just nonstop. That I liked. I'm proud of it. I got my Ranger tab that used to be on my leg with my Jack of all trades on my arm. I was proud of going to Ranger School as a Marine. The gut check is what makes it hard. Now, I won't speak for young entry-level soldiers. You're going to learn a lot there. But I got a Ranger handbook in Coronado in, 1990. We used the Ranger handbook for training. I learned that in amphibious reconnaissance course. I carried it in my butt pack all my recon days. You get to ANGLICO, you do the same thing. You carry a Ranger handbook. It's great information.
It is.
And so actually doing it as a school, we don't get nothing out of it as Marines. You can't wear the tab, so, it was good. It was good training.
Wow. That's awesome hearing you guys going through it. And that's pretty neat seeing y'all were getting that many slots, and not only getting the slots, but guys passing it. It's always, you don't want to get guys slots and then go over there and not pass and embarrass the Marine Corps, the ANGLICO unit. And sounds like you guys did anything but. That's pretty damn cool right there.
I was one of the honor grads.
Oh, wow.
And I got the AUSA Leadership Award. And
Wow.
actually the gold coin the general gave me is right in there amongst those coins. You can't see it.
Wow.
It's all my special coins. But because the only challenge educationally for me there was, one, their doctrine and techniques, their TTPs per se, which I knew most of them, but being able to prove it, through training, through peer evaluations and with the RIs. But like, I was a summer class. We had a ton of West Point officers. Wow. And they didn't even give an officer honor grad in my course because they were so angry. The RIs and the leadership were so angry at the leadership difference between the young officers and the enlisted. And which I thought was interesting, seeing it from that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
But yeah, it was it was a good school. I mean, it's a damn gut check. But yeah, we only had, I won't name them, at the class before me that was with Young. We only had one of our guys drop out in that 1.5 year window where we're getting a lot of quotas. But in my, what they call the Ranger assessment phase, the RAP phase, first couple weeks, we started with 9 Marines. 3 of us Marines graduated. And most of those guys were because of injury. That's one of the big parts. They get injured. And I got injured, especially in Dahlonega Mountain phase. You know, I cracked a rib doing what they call a koala when they tell you to mount a tree. Well, me being a jackass and a sergeant, I went flying at that cedar tree and I rotated my body and tried to koala upside down. And I ended up hurting a rib. And then, yeah. But the other fun thing about it, I only did 5 graded patrols in Ranger School. 5 graded patrols. I was not allowed after Dahlonega to be a point man. I had no graded requirements in Florida phase. The RIs would not let me close to the patrol, the PL, the patrol leader position, which graded position. They would not let me be point man in Florida so that my navigational skills couldn't help the PL and APL, the graded positions per patrol. So I was either carrying a 60 or just one of the Joes for Florida phase. The only thing they let me do in Florida phase was be lead swimmer for pulling a rope across a creek. They let me do that. They didn't let me be a coxswain on our big invasion, where we row, we're rowing for that invasion. No motors on the Zodiac. But I did get a major plus spot report I got a lot of them. That's why I got that AESA leadership award. But in that beach invasion, that little bitty tiny island invasion for training, the number 1 and number 2 mans in the front of the Zodiac kept falling asleep because you're in Florida phase. You're droning hard. People will pass out walking. And the number 1 and number 2 man kept falling asleep. So, I smacked them on the back of their big ass floating vest that we had to wear. I was smacking them with my oar to wake them up. And so I thought I was getting in trouble, but I got a major plus spot report for, troop welfare. So,
jeez, yeah, I can imagine. It's throughout the years, it's always been a nightmare, and guys always talking about losing drastic amounts of weight and the injuries that come out of Ranger School.
I lost 50 pounds, and the bottom of my feet look like I had glued felt. If you've ever seen a dive boot, like in Okinawa, they have this, 1/2 inch thick felt that's glued to the bottom of your dive boot. That's the way my feet look. They were just, it didn't hurt. It's just a fungus layer on the bottom of your feet because you're constantly moving. In summer class, you're sweating the whole time. So, but, between the rib and a few other ancillary injuries, I didn't get recycled. I would never let that happen. For a Marine, if you get recycled, you're going home. But there's no way in hell I would ever quit, because to me, that would make the Marine Corps look bad. And my unit look bad. To invest enough into me and to allow me to go to school. So I go on to Ranger School, lost 50 pounds. I was in my upper 190s, come back right at 150. Get back, Captain Bruce is my Salto IC. Lozano and all them are in there. And I come walking in, and Captain Bruce is sitting there, my Salto IC at this point. McCormick had moved to ops. And I'm like, hey, sir, what's happening? I just got back. He almost didn't recognize me. He thought I was a new check-in because I was so skinny. Well, I asked where the guys are. Well, the guys are all at this, the swim tank. They're on Flores. So I go over. They're doing, canopy training, get up under the canopy if you're jumping in the water, how to get out from under without drowning. They're just doing pool training, annual requirement. Well, I'd always been a good swimmer. And Recon, my Recon days made me a decent, I'm probably more advanced than most, but I became a pretty decent swimmer. But because I'd gotten heavier, I had a little bit more fat on the bones, my buoyancy was amazing. And I jumped in the pool. I damn near swam. Something I'd never felt in years. I started going straight to the bottom. I didn't have that buoyancy anymore. So I actually had to, to tread water with the guys. I actually had to work. I wasn't used to that. So it was, that was quite the interesting experience. Well, the unit sends me on 30 days leave or 3 weeks leave or whatever it was. Because like I'd said, we're already scheduled the summer of 99 to disband. This is right around the first part of September of 98. Well, what do? Units closing down, you go to training. So what? They sent me to sergeant's course, right there in Pendleton. Well, that's 2 months. That's going to eat some time up. I go to sergeant's course. I honor grad sergeant's course. So now the command is looking at me like, you honor grad Ranger school, get this leadership award. You're number 1 out of 100 plus students at your leadership school, sergeant's course. Well, yeah, you're going to be a drill instructor. Yeah. So in that time, and I'm like, Well, got it switched. I'm going to check into recruiting school May of 99. I go to Mount Instructor's course right after Christmas. We're just killing time, taking up school seats, and then starting to shut the unit down, getting rid of equipment, turning stuff to dermo. And, I load my Jeep up, drive down to NCRD San Diego for recruiting school in May of 99. And, down there for a couple months, become a recruiter, and they send me to do pretty well in recruiting school. And because I had switched from drill instructor orders to recruiting orders, they give me by name replacement. So I put in first thing, I want RS Oklahoma City. I get RS Oklahoma City. And when I check, before I'd even graduated school, I'd went to a good friend of mine, Sergeant Major Steve Bell, but then he was Gunnery Sergeant Steve Bell. He's the NCOIC of RSS Claremore, Oklahoma. Same place I recruited out of both times. Town right next to mine. He's from Locust Grove. He's from right up the road. Been in the Marine Corps since the early 80s. I walk in and I'm like, hey, I want to come here and work for you. He goes, no, you don't. He goes, great man, very honest. I mean, he's a good man. He tells me, you don't want to come here. We're like second from the bottom in the whole country of recruiting in all the recruiting stations in the country. We're missing mission. We've got all these problems. You do not want to come here. I said, no, I want to come here. And so I got lucky that when I graduated recruiting school, I came to RS Oklahoma City with another guy, and me and him both, named Paul Costanzo, came right to RSS Claremore, Recruiting Step Station Claremore. And I'm a sergeant. And I'm a sergeant with, technically at this point, 10 years in the Marine Corps. I got that broken time, but I had joined 10 years before. One of the reasons I didn't want to be a drill instructor is there's no way somebody like me was going to get, accelerated advancement, meritorious promotion as a drill instructor. Don't look the part, don't act the part. It's not my mentality. But I can do that on recruiting. I love people. I obviously love talking. And I love the Marine Corps, so how hard can recruiting be? And it wasn't. Steve Bell mentored me amazingly. When I started getting on the end of my leash, he drugged me back in. He knew just the way to do it. He would write on my, back then we still used the big desk calendars. Yeah, you had your binder, but you had your desk calendar. And we would write information on that. And I'd come in first thing in the morning, and if I wasn't where I needed to be on numbers, he would just write right along with Spanky. And he knew that would drive me crazy. I'd storm into his office. What the hell? Blah, blah, blah. Hey, give me my numbers. Okay, I got it. And he knew that I would go right out, put multiple people on deck, close out for the month. He knew how to lead me. I love that man. I mean, he lives out here by the lake. We're still in contact today. And he knew the perfect way to get me to do the job. So I became recruiter of the year my first year out.
Jeez.
He got NCOIC of the year. We got station of the year. Chuck Allen, who had been there a year ahead of me, He got rookie recruit of the year before. So that's a direct reflection on Steve Bell's leadership. He knew how to work us, how to have fun, because we had a lot of fun. And yeah, get meritorious staff sergeant my first year, a little over a year on the street, a year and a half is when I finally got promoted. And that's when my grandpa died. The one had been 30 years in the Marine Corps in Yuma. That was 2000. He died December 2000, and I got meritorious staff sergeant January 2nd, 2001. Wow. So they promoted me over the phone. My command did. While I'm in Yuma at the bachelor housing with my mom, so that I can have them sew staff sergeant chevrons on my blues to do my grandpa's funeral.
Wow.
It was pretty cool.
What that was awesome of them for you to be able to wear that extra stripe for the funeral. That's wow, just outstanding, and very sorry for his loss as well. That's
it's
terrible.
Inevitable for all of us, brother.
Absolutely. So January of 2001, are you still in the recruiting game, as we call it, when 9/11 happens? Or?
Yeah. So I got to the office in July of 99. Go through the training, start working the street, all that. Well, in the summer of 01, Steve Bell, who's a gunny at the time, gets selected to first sergeant. So he's going to have to leave to go back to go back to a unit as a first sergeant. Well, because I'd done so well on recruiting, they talked to me about being NCOIC. Well, long story short, they split our office in half. They give another young guy that's doing real well in Bartlesville half of our area, and I take Claremore, Miami, Oklahoma, and I have half the area. So it's no longer a 5-man station with 3 offices. Or 4 offices, sorry. They break us into 2 substations with 2 offices each. I'm a young staff sergeant. The other guy's a young up-and-coming, staff sergeant NCOIC, and they make me a boss. Well, my ex-wife and kids are living in California. At this point, I've got my youngest son born in 2000. My oldest son was born in 99, found out when I was in Ranger School that she was pregnant with him. And my older daughter's a young, 12, 13-year-old. And not quite. Somewhere in there. 3rd, 4th grade, 9. And we're getting divorced. They're living in California. So I'm like, I'm going to just take my Jeep, take a couple weeks off, and I'm going to head out and see them. And I'm just going to drive out in my Jeep, top down, take my Ranger roll, my bivy sack, and just camp out, just enjoy a break as someone that might become a career recruiter. If I take over NCOIC and like it, I might be staying out here. That's kind of where we were talking about. And I'm on my way back, to flash forward. I'm in New Mexico. And I'm kind of skirting the 40, but I'm kind of breaking up and down it. But I'm in, I pulled over, got tired over the night, pulled over under a tree, rolled out my Ranger roll. Woke up pretty early that morning while I stopped in to get gas at a gas station, get me a cup of coffee and a snack, and I'm on my way back, here. And, sitting there in line, waiting to pay for my food, and the second plane hits, live on TV. And I'm like, I go out to the payphone, call the command, and I'm like, hey, I'm on my way back. Because I'm thinking, even though I'm on recruiting duty, I'm going to most likely be able to go back to my ANGLICO job or even a Recon job, but mainly ANGLICO, and go to work. Now, this is big. We're going to be doing some serious work. They're like, no, we're good. Everything, just check in. We've already been alerted. Planes are going to be grounded. Be careful. We don't know what's going on. So I basically leave New Mexico, jump on the 40, and fly all the way to Oklahoma City, you know, driving, but I was flying as fast as a Jeep will go. So now I'm 140 miles northeast of Oklahoma City, where my recruiting office is in Claremore. But I stop at the command, and I'm like, "Hey, talk to Captain Alejandro's working in the operations." And he goes, "You ain't going, you ain't leaving." I'm like, "No, I want to get back." But you got to remember, they disbanded all the ANGLICOs except for 3rd and 4th, the reserve units. And this is 01. They haven't brought them back yet. They're in the process, I think, of 2nd ANGLICO, but ANGLICOs are gone. Recon battalions are gone. And, or some of them. I'm like, I gotta do something. Well, John Dillard is hitting me up for orders if I'm going to leave recruiting. And at this same window of time, within probably a month of September 11th, and he goes, "We got 3 billets that we need somebody at with talking to me specifically with your background, your abilities." He goes, "We've got Naval Special Warfare Development Group. We got a billet that's going to open up there, in the fire support, the support element. We've got Holbert Field. We've got a transitioning guy there. And we've got the new Det 1 that we need somebody there." Well, in the process of all this, the girl I was chasing had been joined the Marine Corps. I didn't recruit her, and was in Okinawa, Japan. And she's in the Philippines, in Mindanao Island, with 9th ESB doing support for the Camp Zamboanga, if I remember correctly, that a lot of the guys are working out of, a lot of like Charlie first guys, and they're doing missions out of. So she's out there building roads. And I haven't really thought about it at that point. I told Dillard, I said, I'll take the dev group slot. So that process begins. And long story short, probably 2 months, 3 months later, the orders come down the chain that when I get off of recruiting duty in first part of June into May, that I'm going out to, Virginia Beach. Cam Alejandro, I remember him talking to me, like, "Who in the hell did you call? What are you doing? What is this? Why you need to fly out there for an interview?" All this kind of crap. And I decide that I'm going to contact the monitor and tell him I want to go to Okinawa, Japan. Find me something there. Well, that threw a hornet's nest. Everybody's from the ANGLICO community is getting a hold of me, John Dillard mainly. What we pulled, we basically pull strings for you to go out to this billet. What the hell are you thinking? So few Marines get the opportunity to work there. And he's like, "Why?" Chasing ass, top. Chasing a woman. And yeah. I get to Okinawa. They find a billet for me right back at 12th Marine Regiment. And the master guns at the MEF fires, a guy named Gunnery Sergeant Greg Legowski. He's leaving 312. And so the regiment, which is a guy named Master Sergeant Bolanos, he says, "Hey, I need to go down and take Lego's position." Now, at this point, I had 1 year in the artillery as a fire support, as an 0861 fire support. 1 year. Of that 1 year in 1995-96, I did all of 4 to 5 months with an artillery battalion, because 6 months was with the MUN as a naval gunfire guy. I had no artillery experience at staff level. So the planning process, the computer programs they use, I knew very little about that. So they send me down, and I do like 4 or 5 deployments with an FSCC. Had really good Marines working for me that made me look good because they knew the AFATIDS, Advanced Field Artillery Tactical Data System. I did not. I'm a ground guy. I'm not a mid-level computer guy, and they made me look really good. But I knew planning and tactics. So the master guns at MEF says, hey, we're building a new ANGLICO, 5th ANGLICO, and I want you to do it. Because he had been a 2nd ANGLICO and 1st ANGLICO guy way back in the day. I mean, you got to think, he's getting close to 30 years experience in those in 04, 03, 04. So in 04, they give me orders to build 5th ANGLICO right there at Camp Hansen. I was already there. I lived in a place in Ishikawa. I'm already going through another divorce with a woman I chased over there. He had got out, moved back to the States with our daughter. My youngest was born in Okinawa. And I'm like, I got nothing but time. So start making the unit. And I've got me and a major. And we're going back to DC and the, Quantico every month for 6 months straight. I think I did 7 trips to Quantico in 7 months. To find bodies, to, plan. And at this point, 1st ANGLICO and 2nd ANGLICO hadn't been standing up that long. I mean, they were maybe 2.5 years in. And so we're meeting up with them, the commanders. And like Colonel Campbell that Colonel Robinson was talking about, we're linking up with their ops, me and a major. And at this point, I'm a gunny. I'd only been a gunny maybe a year. Because I picked up gunny pretty quickly for our community because I'd been meritorious staff sergeant. So here I'm a gunny. I'm building this unit. I'm technically the ops chief, kind of the little everything. We start bringing bodies in. But because I'd been at 1st ANGLICO before it disbanded, I understood the structure. I understood how our TONE, your table of organization, our type of equipment we needed. But the only thing is none of us had the airborne mission. But that actually kind of made it easy. The reserve still had airborne mission. The 3 active duty ANGLICOs, we didn't have the airborne mission, which actually helps because in Okinawa, there's so few places you can parachute off island. And all the logistic and requirements for that mission, the equipment, the specialists, the riggers, all that stuff you need, that actually just adds more insult to injury when you're building the command. Wow. So that made it pretty easy, but, getting a lot of pilots, getting a lot of artillery officers that are more senior, and pilots that are captains, which the unit is heavy in, and a lot of heavy staff NCOs and NCOs, that does a lot of damage to the regular units in the Marine Corps that typically, your captain's leading a company, not a team. Your major's an XO or bigger, not a platoon commander. Wow. So, you've got a company level operation led by a lieutenant colonel and sergeant major. Most people think a company, they think a captain and a first sergeant. They don't think sergeant major, lieutenant colonel. And because it had been gone for 4 or 5 years and all the changes that were made in the MEFs, Okinawa MHG, it was no longer, one name. Now it's called the MEF Headquarters Group. And I'm battling with the sergeant major that works for a colonel that's telling me you need a master guns like SOTG. You're a company. Companies don't rate command level rank. Lieutenant colonel and sergeant major. I'm like, we're not a group. We're a command. Wow. We don't work for just you. We worked for divisions and brigades and, corps. And that Sergeant Major just battled with me, and because I was a gunny and I'm in, I've got no bodies. I'm trickling in young Marines. Communications field's just giving me, young non-trained guys, which, hey, I'll take what I can get. I'll bring in the right communicators, which I did. I bring in an old recon guy named Ward and brought him from 3rd Recon Battalion, asked him if he wanted to be a part of, be my comm chief, because dude was a stud. He'd actually, back in the early 90s, went down in a 46 crash that killed a number of guys at 1st Force. Broke his back, got injured up, but he lived through it. But he was an animal. And brought in John Calhoun, guy I knew from 1st ANGLICO, guy had been in Kofchi with Lozano on the same thick and salt. Brought him in to run my motor team. That was a tough sell because his wife was active duty Marine. And, who wants to come all the way to Okinawa to do this? Got very lucky. He was our first Sergeant Major, if you want to call it that, before we got a Sergeant Major in. But knowing the right people, bringing in at the right time, made 5th ANGLICO. Hence why I told you when I was watching yours with Colonel Robinson, I don't know. I was like, he failed to talk about 5th. That's personal. I'm a point over that one. I mean, that's just fun and games. And it was interesting, bringing up a new command and TACP quotas and the new direction that the Marine Corps was going with non-FAC, JTACs. This being such a new thing. At the same time, we're making enlisted JTACs in the Marine Corps. So
it has to be crazy building up a complete new unit like this. And I mean, literally from you and another guy to fielding the entire company and then
get 100 and some bodies. Yeah.
Training underway. I mean,
getting a building, getting the trucks, the weapon systems, the ammo, getting everything turned in for training, and then especially trying to jump into the air platform planning process, because you can't do nothing on Okinawa. Can't drop bombs, can't shoot artillery, can't shoot naval gunfire. So you got to do it in Guam, Whiskey 174. You got to do it in all these places off island. And then getting your command into the OIF rotation at the same time. I mean, you got to think, we stand the unit up in late 04, and I deployed for workup with 2nd ANGLICO in 95, and then deploy early 06, January, February of 06. So in a period of 2 years, I'm building a unit, staffing a unit, training a unit, and deploying with 1 platoon. And that's how I sold it to Lieutenant Colonel Schrader, our first CO. I sold it to him that let me go. One, I'm a JTAC. I've been through TASP school. I know I'm a gunny. I know I'm becoming into Master Sergeant pretty soon, in a year or two. Let me not be the ops chief. Let me take the platoon, and I can build operational experience, because 7 months after that, after we would get back off that deployment in September of 06, February, March of 06, 5th ANGLICO as a whole unit's deploying. 07, sorry. So you're taking a unit from brand new, not a single body, not a building, not a truck, not a gun, not an ammo expenditure report, nothing, to by less than 3 years operational in theater with a very robust requirement on 24 to 30 JTAC teams. So, yeah, because we were so non-traditional in 06 with Colonel Campbell. We were JTAC teams. We weren't salts and fix. So, and that's what you got to do. So, I mean, it was fun to be a part of. Now, I hate what happened to me. I didn't get to see that through fruition, of course, but which really sucks.
Yeah.
Invest that amount of time, have really your heart into it to have the opportunity. And then, I'm sure what we'll get into, have it pulled out from under me.
Yeah, yeah. Did you when you deployed in 04, was it with
It was in 06. I didn't deploy in 04. I was building 5th ANGLICO in 04.
Okay. So when you did finally deploy, was it with 5th ANGLICO, some of your guys?
No, we took a platoon, a brigade platoon, like Colonel Robinson was explaining to you, and we attached it to 2nd ANGLICO.
Oh.
So they needed reinforced. So we brought, as a selling point, we brought basically about 50 guys, a brigade platoon attached to 2nd ANGLICO to reinforce the new mission that 2nd ANGLICO was doing. Tons of JTAC teams, like 30 JTAC teams. So we bleed that over, but in the same time, so that we can get operational experience, because you got to think, almost everybody in our unit's brand new. So we know for the accompanied officer that's coming to Okinawa, they're coming to us as a pilot, an artillery officer, whatever it is. We've got them for 3 years, because the back end of that 3 years is going to be our full company, 5th ANGLICO only company deploying. Because at the end of that 3 years, we're going to lose all these bodies. Because you got to figure Okinawa, you only have 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year accompany tours. Most of your tours are 1 to 2 years. They change it to 2. So you can't do a workup and deploy with the guys that you just worked up. See what I'm saying? It's a very complicated scenario. So my philosophy was with my leadership was, okay, if we only got these guys for a year, we got these guys for 2, and we've got some of our aviation officers and artillery officers for 3. Some for 2, some for 3. We need to train. We need to get into a deployment so that we will have good technique to train the new guys for our full company deployment 2.5 years down the road. And see, that's a part a lot of people never talk about. Your training, that's kind of like a pipeline, like we were talking about earlier. When units train you up and then you go operational and then you get injured or something stupid happens, you just wasted 2 years of training and obligation. That's the fear. Well, it's the same way in Okinawa. You have a much shorter training capability because most of your younger Marines are only going to be there for 1 to 2 years. Now, they might extend. Some do. Your married Marines are there for a guaranteed 3, but even some of your unaccompanied officers are only there for, 2 years. And F-18 drivers, technically, they only got to be out of the cockpit for a year, and then they go back in the cockpit because they don't want them out of cockpit too long. We'll try to do a 7-month deployment and a workup in that. That's the other problem with Okinawa. It's not like being back stateside. You're working in very fine-tuned windows, which makes it hard to school train people. It makes hard to do training packages. Now, it's not unachievable. You got to do with what you've got. And I think that's where I got lucky that leadership at the MEF knew that I would have the insight and the assistance and the leadership of my officers to keep me reined in to build because that was going to be my job. I'm the ops chief. I'm doing training. I'm in charge of it. I'm building all the requirements for JTAC certification. And, and I've got to make sure before we deploy in a few years, not even 2, I got to make sure everybody's to standard by the Marine Corps in a very restricted environment. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Never thought I'd get shot, but happens.
The pressure before you even get into a war zone is immense going on here. It just it like you said, people don't put into perspective what it takes not only to run and field a already fielded and historic unit that's already been in the Army TO&E forever, but for you to stand something up like this, get pilots, men, officers, like you said, ammo. I mean, it's a wonder you did it the way as quick as you did and as efficiently as you did. To be quite frank, it's a testament to you and your training and men you had with you.
Well, in need of the Marine Corps. You know, like we were talking about, Colonel Roms talked to you about infinite wisdom in the Marine Corps. I love the Marine Corps. Common sense sometimes gets left out the window. I don't understand it. Recon, I learned to think fifth principle of trolling, common sense. Always use common sense.
Man,
like when I was there when they disbanded 1st Recon Battalion. Then I was there in summer 99 when I left for recruiting when they disbanded 1st ANGLICO. Infinite wisdom of the, you know, the politicians and senior leadership I'll never understand. I get it from because of my end of my career, I understand why they want to base realignment closures or unit closures. I get that. You got to save money, and we're easy. You know, get rid of the military is a great way to save money because we spend a lot of it. But these critical assets, like Recon Battalion was, ANGLICOs were, but because we were in peacetime that whole time frame, what do? You get rid of what's expensive, and they're really small. You're only talking 100 to 150 guys in these commands. So they spend a lot of money for a very small footprint asset. And we're not in war. We don't need them. And we haven't really used them for real war, if you want to call it, since Desert Storm, which wasn't that much of it, but they really used ANGLICO assets and reconnaissance assets tremendously.
Man.
But I think that initial year in Afghanistan, you know, October of 01 to October of 02, and then the inside of the push to go in 03 in Iraq, they realized combined arms capabilities and working with foreign militaries is really good by 2, 3 different organizations in the whole military. Special Forces. It's one of their biggest missions. And I would say the next one is ANGLICO, Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. Everything else will be small, temporary, special operations assets that do it. But if you think about it, probably the one, at least in the Marine Corps, the number one asset for doing that job is ANGLICO.
Wow.
So it's a no-brainer. Look at the Army. What they do in OIF, OEF. Mobile training teams, mitts and bits. They built this new program to attach standard soldiers to Iraqi or Afghani National Army soldiers. Now, civil affairs could do parts of it. PSYOPs in the Army could do parts of it, but you never had many standalone units that were designed to run U.S. assets with a foreign military force. So, unlike the Recon battalions, I think Headquarters Marine Corps went, we've made a mistake. And I say all that to say this. I think the reason we were capable of doing it at 5th ANGLICO, building it so quickly, getting the right people, getting the right equipment, getting the right training, happened because they didn't, Marine Corps Systems Command, Headquarters Marine Corps, all these people realized we messed up. And now we need another one because 5th Force Reconnaissance Company I told you about stood up summer of 92 when I got orders for a bunch of guys but didn't go. 97, it was gone. Yeah, it stood for 5 years and then they got rid of it. Wow. And just applied the training into 3rd Recon Battalion at Camp Schwab. So, yeah, I was lucky. So glad I had the opportunity to do it. I'm so glad, and the right people asked me to do it because I could have possibly went to be a support guy at Dev Group, which could have been wicked cool with those guys. Not saying I would have done anything fun like all the SEALs do, but who knows?
Oh yeah, just being there in that atmosphere could have been, who knows?
Yeah, And I don't know what happened to me in 06 wouldn't have happened to me no matter what in whatever environment I was in.
Would you like to,
Yeah.
I don't want to bring up any bad things or anything. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what
Oh, no.
happened?
But there's nothing bad about it. I mean, yeah, I get lucky. We get to second ANGLICO, do a workup for a couple months in Arizona, running there, really working through our CF 18 tough books, working through our tracking systems in vehicles, doing the mission of ANGLICO, but with I got to admit, Colonel Campbell really got a lot of support. We had all the new thermal imagery. We had all the new tough book computer systems. We had all the new Rover 3 assets for linking into lightning pods on fast moving aircraft for dropping bomb, precision guided GBUs. We had paraclete vests. We didn't wear issue. We had a suite. And I think we had 30 or 32 JTAC team suites. That was astronomical. It was impressive. And so we deployed January, it was late January of 06 after our workup. And then, or I guess it was early January. That part gets mixed up. Don't really care. Do like the typical rotations do. You fly into Aliyah Salim, ironic, from Desert Storm. Fly into Aliyah Salim, stage, get your classes, be there a couple days, and then, fly into either whatever part of Western Iraq you're going into for the Marine Corps. Typically you're going to go into Al Assad. Like for us, our unit headquarters is in Al Assad. So we C-17 into Al Assad. We, kind of get a lay of the land going on there, do a bunch of shooting, get your radios, you're building up, checking everything in country, waiting to determine left seat, right seat. Because we're going to take over for first ANGLICO, who's in theater. And Colonel Bristol, not Colonel Bristol, Colonel Campbell, Scott Campbell, he really had a great idea on how to utilize our assets effectively in a very, ever-changing country. I said early on, like Desert Storm, linear contiguous battlefield, what we traditionally think fighting phase lines online, revolutionary style. And then there's this concept that came around in the early 2000s of distributive operations, kind of like special operations fights, where you're decentralized and you're placed in individual teams with independent capability supported by that local, unit, whether it's Army, Navy, Marine Corps, doesn't matter. So you are not attached to them. Like in my case, we go to Eastern Ramadi out of Crigador. We're attached to the 1st Iraqi Army Division. I'm supported by beans, bullets, ammo, etc., battery, all of it, by 1st of 506 out of 101st Airborne Division. Okay, they own East Ramadi out of combat outposts in Crigador. Then you had Camp Tiger, Camp Rangers, where the Iraqis are at. Then 22 BCT, Pennsylvania National Guard, owns Ramadi in a whole. Then Western Ramadi, Camp Ramadi proper, where they're at, the Marine Corps is there, and they are patrolling Western Iraq and a company level support in the government center of Al Anbar province, which is Center Ramadi. That's guarded by Marines. And then the whole, obviously, is controlled by United States Marine Corps. See what I'm saying? Much different dynamic nowadays. So you have to be prepared to trust your guys you send out, that they will have support, be able to accomplish the mission of who they're supporting, but be resupplied and taken care of by an entity they're not directly under. That's very foreign for the Army to understand, if you think about it. Because if we're giving you what you need to do your job, but you're attached to the Iraqis, but we're supporting you, you should be under us if we need you for a working party. That's the way I look at it. We're in all the briefings with them because we have to coordinate. And that comes into play with Jocko's guys, with Seth Stone and his guys when they got there. We're all part of the same meetings, but we're there for information flow and support flow as a secondary mission to our Iraqi mission. See what I'm saying? So it's very decentralized. At the same time, falling under a centralized thought process. It's very complicated, but it's very awesome. I mean, it's not that complicated. I'm not the smartest guy.
And with I mean, we hear and see footage of Ramadi being extremely hot, notorious historically being a nightmare. Was it all it was cooked up to be, and as bad as it goes down in history as being?
It could be worse. You know, bad in my era is not storming Normandy, or not 3,000 Vietnamese, either Viet Cong or NVAs, charging your little firebase. It is relative to that time. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a skirmish or if it's blown out, long-lasting combat. So there's a reason why we don't like it. And there's a reason why, if you like it, we're going to question whether or not you should be doing it.
Yeah.
The first day we pulled into Full Metal Jacket at Corregidor. That's before the SEALs even got there. From SEAL Team 3, from Task Force Bruiser. We pull in Caesar Janae, Captain Caesar Janae. He's the SALT officer, going back to that traditional understanding. But he's the SALT officer now at JTAC. He's just an F-18 pilot. He's got 3 guys. He's got an FO and 2 communicators. I'm a Marine Gunnery Sergeant. I'm the FIC leader, if you think about it under traditional standards, with 2 communicators and a forward observer. But we're working in lockstep together. He'll support a battalion. I'll support a battalion. And if they've got 3 battalions going out that day with the Iraqis, working 3 different areas of East Ramadi, 2 will get supported and 1 won't. So it's up to us to tell them it's too dangerous for us to split 4 guys into 2 twos to support that 1 battalion. But what we'll do is, if it's close enough, your 2 longest ones will get fed out between Caesar and me. And if the other one's close to us, if I need to pop over there and drop air support or do the job, we'll peel off that mission and get to it and see what we can do. Or if they've got the U.S. Army, the Army has their enlisted, their JTACs, the enlisted terminal air controllers from the Air Force that work for them. So they've got 4 teams of those guys, and they've got a liaison in the battalion COC. We don't have anybody in that COC. We make face-to-faces. We tell them this is our call signs, Lightning 4-1, Lightning 4-2. We're here. We plan with you. We work with you. But we don't have a direct liaison in the battalion COC or the regimental COC. Now, that's what the SALT used to do. The supporting arms liaison team would be at that level with that foreign unit to give U.S. communication capability. And the FIC would be with the lead element fighting and dropping bombs, or calling surface assets or air support assets. That went away in OIF, OEF, and 0506. It's, to me, distributive operations. We're doing a traditional mission, but not in the traditional table of organization. And I give it up to Colonel Campbell. He did a great job on it.
Man, that is just crazy. The battle space there and everything, and deconflicting and getting everybody on the same book. That is crazy. How long were you guys in Ramadi this go round?
Yes, we got there in February. You know, we went to Al Assad, then we went to Camp Ramadi proper, where our platoon headquarters was, and you know, that's when, you know, Major Burke, David Burke, he was an F-18 driver with Caesar. Him and Caesar, I think, came about the same time when they came to Okinawa. Great guy, F-18 pilot, you know, smart, you know, didn't put up a fight. We had an artillery major that they worked hand in hand together. He took some work getting away from the traditional artillery mindset and getting into an ANGLICO mindset. Pilots are a lot easier because they think about things a little bit more independently. Artillery officers, if they've only ever been in the artillery at certain levels, they can get a little iffy when you're working outside of the traditional box. And yeah, so then they came up with the idea. Well, we need you guys with the Iraqi brigade, you know, out of Corregidor. Originally, we were going to live at Camp Tiger, that a little 2-story headquarters building that I think was General Razak was in, and they were wanting to give us a room for the 8 of us to stay there. And when me and Caesar got there, we had our 2 trucks. You know, we have a very robust capability with weapon systems and radios. So we check in the first day, and Caesar's not comfortable with it. Not comfortable with the gate security. He's like, let's go over and check in with the first 506 out of 101st Airborne and see if they've got a place that we can stay and not stay right here, just across the street. But I'm going to tell you right now, 100 yards, gate to gate, tops. You didn't want to cross in 06. This is to get to your question, because you're right on the outskirts of a pretty good-sized city or town. So you walk from gate to gate. You're not in the vehicle. The chances of you getting shot from a house 300 yards away or an IED being planted there overnight, even though you got the gate guards, it's very high. Route Michigan, that main drag, it was ugly. You know, between IEDs being the biggest one, the EFPs, thank you, Iran, coming out and being placed. That was a new tactic that we weren't accustomed to. And then all that push within, you know, Fallujah and Al-Anbar and all that time, rushing all that capability of the enemy into Ramadi. And then Ramadi kind of getting left alone, especially eastern, northern Jaleba Safia on the northeast side and the Malab district on that southeast side. A lot of people pushed that wanted to do bad things to us, pushed into that part of the city. And I mean, you look at not much longer after when they drove that mixer truck with explosives into the front gate at the Gov Center that killed those 2 Marines there in Ramadi when that happened. That's the tenacity of those people. Got to give it up.
I'm sorry. Someone was interrupting me about that. I apologize.
No, you're good. Well, we went a lot longer than we expected to, but you want me to get on to May 16th?
Yes, sir. I apologize about that.
Yeah, but it's all good, man. We got to be. Remember, I told you this morning, Semper Gumby, always flexible. Yeah. So we get to Camp Ramadi. It's right there in February of 06. We come across the road. We check in. The Army says, "Hey, we got a spot for you. It's our overflow called Full Metal Jacket." Basically, all they had in there was they had 2 female laundry, PFC and a staff sergeant from the Army. They had, you know, it was pretty road. You know, no air conditioning. They had sandbagged windows. It was an old agricultural school, you know, before everything went on. Hello Palm Grove. It was right on the edge of Camp Corregidor, right on the boundary. The first 6 had the main part of it. So we were just on the edge of the compound inside of an old cinder block wall that had been there. We pull in and we get mortared. Very first day we get there, we pull in and the RAM system alarm goes off, and yeah, you know it. And we're either getting under vehicles. I'm actually standing there kind of laughing, going, well, this is the way it's going to be, boys. You know, and, you know, it didn't hit us, hit the generator, you know, 30, 40 feet away or whatever it was, right on the back side of the building, because that's how you had power. You know, you had your couple, you know, primary and a secondary generator. And so that was a welcome to, and we were on the streets pretty quick. And we started out going up to Jaleba and Sofia, working the Euphrates River on the northeast. That was, and they're like little villages and little towns, and clearing up there. And, you know, there wasn't as much pushback. There was some, and kind of getting to know the Iraqis, getting to know the first 506, getting that relationship built, you know, and then it, you know, about the time Seth and his guys got there from Bruiser was about the time it was starting to get heavy in the Malab district. They were getting they were having a lot of issues. And then that's when, you know, it switched to work in the Malab district and just north on the, you know, southeast of the hospital in Ramadi. But there was this big amusement park ruins there. And eventually they put in a combat outpost there. They put in a combat outpost on southeast side of Malab, you know, about the end of my time there. But, and then it just kept getting heavier and heavier. I mean, we would do 2-3 patrols in a day and gunfire every patrol. And some skirmish, some just pot shots and run. You know, fortunately for us, I told Caesar and the guys, I'm done riding in the vehicles with the Iraqis. They had old 5 tons with metal sheet armor, you know, nothing like the armor we had, and definitely not MRAP, you know, style armor. I don't like being in a box, and I don't like, I didn't like that. We did it a couple times, and I'm like, after that, now I'll walk out. You know, we'll just walk into town. Camp Corregidor is right on the edge of the city. We had the CBs that came in for a time to build our HLZ, our helicopter landing zone. Fort Corregidor had them basically do a reinforced gate at the south end so we could just walk out the palm grove, because if you drove out the front gate, went down to the corner to get past the canal, we'd get IED'd, RPG'd. I mean, the first 506 was getting hammered every time they would go out. And I was like, told Caesar, let's talk to the guys about just walking out. You know, let's walk out the gate, take away that capability from them, keep them thinking. You know, not my decision. I give advice, give my thoughts as a senior staff NCO. You make the decisions. You're the officers. But common sense would tell me, take away that 1,000 yards of problem, you know, that kept reoccurring. And, you know, you've got this big canal in between you and the edge of the town. And I'm talking the edge of the camp to the canal to the first group of houses is not a football field. Maybe just a little over at tops. Small arms is going to get you all the time. RPGs are going to get you every time. And then the IEDs and then the EFPs just adds insult to injury. So we did that a few times. Yeah, we would just walk out, and then they built that combat outpost and hadn't permanently manned it yet, but they were using it and maintaining it. And we just beat the streets. Just walk the streets, draw them out, and affect them.
Man. And you end up on one of these patrols, don't you end up catching a sniper round here?
Yep, May 16th, 2006. Jeez. We had a pretty interesting month. And at this point, Seth Stone and, you know, the Charlie guys from Task Force Bruiser, you know, Leaf Babin had, Delta. Seth Stone comes on our side, marches, into March, whatever it was. And we're pretty much just saying, hey, let's work together. Let's just strengthen numbers when we're already small groups anyway, strengthen asset capability, and it worked out. I mean, but the day I got shot, I think we were third patrol that day. Walking the streets doing knock and talks, and we got to one of those parts of town. First guy, we had a group of Iraqis with us. That's a very small group. And there was 8 of us, 4 of my guys, 4 of Seth's guys. And we just went down, we're moving down the street, and we're trying to find a good position, come under fire. So we kind of go firm, and in a city like that, every house has a 10-foot brick wall around it, cinder block wall. So you kind of get firm, and then start maneuvering, make up your mind. And we went into a house, couldn't get a good objective, put in an overwatch. It was Mikey Mansour and his guys, small overwatch, and we're going to start moving. And we're going to go down, and it wasn't safe for me to try to get in a, LMAV or to get in a GBU to drop it on to destroy it, the house. So it was like, hey, let's just maneuver up and take it. Draw them out. They're shooting at us. Let's just get after them. And because sometimes that's unfortunate reality. You want to use your capabilities, but sometimes the assets ain't going to be there or aren't smart to use. So you just do what you're supposed to do. Do the gunfight. And shot the first guy. We broke into 2 teams on each side of a 2-lane side, a main side road, and then it had an alley or a smaller road that came off of it. And we're going to cross over that. They're in this building. Problem is, they had a sniper in the overwatch, and that we hadn't picked up on yet. He hadn't flagged himself, and shot the first guy. One of the Iraqis went through his hip and out his butt. And then I'm going to, we're suppressing fire in this building, thinking that's where it came from. And I'm kind of pulling up my guys. Well, I've got, my Marine Huerta and a couple of the SEALs, JP Donnell. One of the other guys, they're on my side of the street with me. And we just start to cross. You got that danger area, got that side road going. Target option is most likely across that road. Well, I'm going to cover security. Well, the problem was with my guys being, I was almost 35 years old. I was a gunnery sergeant. I a lot more experience in my career than all my young guys. I always walked point. Sometimes it'd be the Iraqis, but I'm always, when it comes to my guys, going to be up front. Because unfortunately you're probing the lines. It's like being a point man in a recon team. You're kind of the one that's going to probe the lines. You're going to draw the fire if it does happen, especially in an urban environment. But I don't want them to get hurt. They're my guys. They're all young, in their early 20s at best. And even all the SEALs, they were all young guys, mid-20s. And I'm like, I'll draw that, and you get part of that mentality of like, never going to happen to me. And at that point, it hadn't. All the situations that had occurred with us, always gotten super lucky and never had a mark on me. And I went to push over that and waited for where to get it behind me and pull security. Got me right through the knee. And I'm sitting there suppressing fire. And next thing I know, middle of the road, right on my face. And that was the wildest point, because you're going from sustaining fire and moving, doing immediate action, to the confusion of why is everything dark? And then my body's physical reaction, because the bullet went dead center of my knee. So it blew off the top of my tib and fib, fractured my femur a couple of, total popliteal nerve and artery separation. And, you go down, not realizing how fast it happens, I wasn't even in any pain. And then the immediate response of the body is to kind of shut off systems because of the shock. So my whole lower body from my belly button down felt like my feet were asleep. You get that tingling feeling. but I'm not in any pain. But the problem was when I fell forward because of all the equipment we wear, my leg buckled back under my body, my left leg, and I used my rifle on a coyote strap from the top of my paraclete vest. So if I took my hands off to talk to somebody, my rifle just hung straight down. And I walked around the city a lot with that not being at the ready. I just let it hang so that it's, especially in town with all the people, so they don't feel threatened. So I got really accustomed to just let my rifle hang. Well, at this point, I've got the weapon up, we're suppressing. Well, when I went down, because of that motion and the speed of it, my weapon went under me. My leg folded up on top of my weapon, and I landed on top of it face first in the street. But it was so fast, it just, it's almost like you black out and you wake up and you're like, where am I at? So I went down so fast. Well, all my training, all my understanding in combat, get your weapon out in front of you. Now, I don't realize the damage because I'm not in any pain. But the gunfire is still going on, right? Everything is still happening. And I go to try to push myself up, not knowing what's happening. And I'm stuck because my leg is stuck on my rifle and my paraclete is here. So every time I try to push up, it's pulling me back down. And I don't know why. So I do the next thing in the training is I disconnect the paraclete, the snap on the paraclete, and I pull my weapon out to get back to the ready. But I'm in the prone position. And the gunfight's still going on. All this, just everything that's going on is going on. And I get back to doing what I'm supposed to be doing. No one's yelling at me. I'm not controlling anybody. We're all independently doing what we know to do. And I'm not thinking to hit my radio to communicate that I'm down because I don't even know. I'm not in any pain. And I go to reload. And when I go to reload, I carry 12 magazines on the front of my paraclete vest. And I got my radio, got my 203 rounds. I carry 10 hand grenades, 10 203 HEs in my paraclete pouches. And I would carry 3 smokes on this chest. And then my in-biter radio is here with my extra antenna. I go to reload. There's the bottom of my boot. It's looking right at me on top of my magazines. And I get a magazine out, I reload, and then I feel this jerk, like confused jerk. Well, what it was Huerta and JP Donnell, who were behind me on that side of the street, came up to grab my paraclete handle and dragged me into that courtyard we'd been at, which was maybe 30, 40 yards away to the gate. And because I was 200 pounds body and probably 275, 285 with equipment, so you have front plate, back plate, side plates, 13 magazines, rifle, 10 hand grenades, 10 HE rounds, in-biter radio, Camelback with my water on it, and then my survival kit that's back behind there. I was at least 275, 285. And maybe a little bit more. I didn't have my day pack on. My RTO, Corporal Mitchell, my primary RTO, Huerta was my assistant RTO, but pretty much he was my, my second. We always traveled together, walking. Mitchell's the only one that normally carried his pack because he's carrying a man pack, 138 and extra batteries and all the stuff. The rest of us just had Camelbacks and whatever gear we could get on our vests. But I was still easy 275, 280, whatever it was. Don't care. But they're tugging. I'm shooting. I'm sitting here sustaining fire and getting pulled. Well, eventually, they flip me all the way over. And I'm staying on target. Now, I'm not a great shot, but I shoot with both my eyes open in combat. Now, we have an ACOG. I have a D-ball, ACOG, everything on my M4 203. So it's ACOG's a 4-power. but you have sights on top of it, so you shoot over it for battle, kind of like battle sight. So I'm just suppressing, and they flip me straight over. Cock-strong kids, both of them. Because you got to think, close to 300 pounds, and they lifted me without breaking my good leg straight over, and I'm sustaining fire, drop me on my ass and get to dragging me. I damn near shot myself in the right foot. But because I'm looking with both eyes, I got so lucky. But then that's when I noticed the damage. I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and my leg's just bouncing like a noodle. And they're dragging me. I'm shooting. I reload. I'm taking a smoke out, putting an HE round in my 203. And next thing you know, there's a little delay. They don't drag me anymore. Right in the middle of the street, don't drag me anymore. And the next thing you know, I'm getting pulled. My focus is all shooting. I'm not paying attention to what's going on behind me. Huerta got shot dragging me. Got shot from half inch above the bottom of his E-plate, his E-sappy. But it knocked him down. So when he dropped, another SEAL, Tom, he might still be active, so I'll just leave it at first name. He runs out and take Huerta's place. So JP and Tom, JP's out. He works for Jocko now. They start dragging me the rest of the way. Well, then they get into the metal door, not the driving door, but the walk-through door on the wall. Well, they have a metal rim all the way around to go between. It had a pin on there to lock the gate that popped up. Well, they got me stuck on that. They're just jerking me to get out of there so the SEAL medic, Wes Baldwin, could work on me. Now, he's already working on the first guy, the Iraqi. And then, thank God, Huerta gets knocked down, but it, does an injury. And then same with Wes. Wes took a pass-through round on his gear on his shoulder. But I'm laying there. Wes is working on me, doing 2 tourniquets because I'm bleeding really badly. Because the femoral's gone. That popliteal bridge where the femoral artery comes down and goes down to your tib and fib. Same with the nerve right behind it. It was right dead center of that. So I'm bleeding like a stuck pig. He's getting the tourniquets on me. Bravo, one of my teammates, Stevens Bravo, he's got his elbow, right in the bridge of my hip, doing what he's trained to do. I'm popping the paraclete for water or scenarios. It has quick release. So you hit it and the cummerbund a lot of the equipment's like that now. Back then, it was pretty new. So, get that plate because, I felt like I could tell I was kind of going into shock. I didn't, but I could tell, your breathing gets labored. Your body's going in to do what it does. It was definitely wanting to turn systems off, right? And it's like 18:07, 6:07 in the evening. It's a beautiful sky. I'm laying there. Wes is working on me. They're doing a bang-up job. Bravo's helping. Guys were coming to check on me. Well, we carry our 10, our big auto injectors, on the vest on the edge of my paraclete. Or I'm not sorry, but on the imbiter case on my paraclete. Well, I pull out. I've trained 40 million times. You pull it out, you pop it, pop the lid off, come around, drive it into your thigh. That'll give you your big chunk of morphine so that you can be happy. I don't know what I did. I popped that off, popped the cap like we've done a million times in training, but somewhere in that process, I rotated it. I don't know how. Come around, slam that thing. I'd spun it, and that needle went right through my pinky and shot on the cinder block wall. We're literally laying there working on me, laughing about me doing that. So I pull it out because up to that point, I kept asking Wes, can I give it? Can I give it? I feel like I'm going to shot. Can I give it? No, not yet. Let me get both tourniquets on. Let me get the blood, ABCs. I got an airway. Got to get my bleeding control. And so I'm like waiting. And then when I do it, well, it went through. I pull it out of my pinky. and I spin it around. I just start jamming it, and we're all laughing because you ain't gonna get nothing out. It's an auto injector. That thing shoots out of that thing, and once it does it, it's gone. So yeah, that was a amusing moment. I'm laying there bleeding like a stuck pig. Screw something up I've trained for a million times and totally understand how to do, and then laying there laughing about it. That's combat. That's the crazy thing about combat. Every emotion that can come out of you in a given time is absolutely insane because you're under this very emotional situation. Your body is going through something it's not built and accustomed to do. And then you find humor. It's just, that's the insanity of combat, is emotions are so out of the norm. If you're angry, you're just kill everything angry. If you're sad, you're just ultraly depressed. Or you get this emotion of humor, everything is funny, whether it should be or shouldn't be. It's such a learning experience. I guess it's the best way to put it. Because fear's there, but fear goes out the window. Then it's technique, training, tactics, what you've done, who's beside you. Excuse me. How do you keep them alive? Covering them, doing the job, accomplishing the mission. The fear is on the backside.
Man, oh man.
Do some talking, brother. I'm doing all the time.
I was just fixing to say we are at 3 hours now. And I was gonna see if do you think we can put, because what you did after the Wounded Warrior work that you've done, and you've still got another Iraq trip, and we've still got to talk about this. I'm wondering, can we do a part 2?
Yeah, let's do a part 2, man. That'd be cool because that to me is more important than what we've already discussed.
And I'm sure everybody watching this with all the information is going to have a bunch of questions that'll be tagged into part 2, I'm sure, because literally everyone said hello and they've been glued in. Usually we got comments or questions and all that, but all of the viewers have been glued in listening. So I know people are going to be either writing notes or getting questions ready for part 2. So I think, if it would be all right, I think the 3 hour mark would be a perfect pinpoint for part 2.
I see that up there to the top left, but that tends to happen when you talk to me. I'm pretty.
It did. This is what we're here for. This is literally, right up our alley, and the exact reason I do this and we do this. So, let me see here real quick. While I've got you, today is Thursday. Next week, depending on your schedule, I don't know if you've got something next Thursday or Friday, but next week I'm wide open as well on the same day, same time as well, depending on your schedule.
Yeah, next Thursday would probably be good. I think my wife is taking her mom for a surgery next Thursday, and I typically don't get involved with that. I let her and her sister do it unless they ask me to be there. Yeah, I could probably do next Thursday if you wanted a similar time. Mondays and Tuesdays is really the only hard, until that next week, the week after Easter, I'm going to be wicked busy. That'd work perfectly.
All righty, well, just stay on a second and we'll get that nailed down. And guys, go ahead and re-listen. If you are listening, take notes, because as you've heard, we're going to do a part 2. We'll get some questions because Lord knows I've got a ton of questions as well with all of the awesome stuff we've heard today. So be ready. Keep an eye out on the notes. I will for sure advertise and let y'all know when we're doing our part 2. But we are going to close down part 1 right now, and we will see you guys probably next week. And I will keep you in touch and let you know about that. So, Mr. Spanky, stay on just a second. I'm going to close this out, and we'll nail that. So, guys, we'll see y'all later. Thank y'all for watching, and we'll get with y'all for part 2 next week. So we